You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 560, our breakdown of the first two episodes of the season premiere of The Acolyte. It's been almost 4 years in the making. We're finally here. It's upon us, and man, there's so much to discuss, and we have a lot of questions to get to, a lot of theories running around in all of our heads. We were kind of talking about this all throughout the course of the last 24, 48 hours. And we want to hear from you guys as well. But first, let's hear from someone who's with us every week. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, this is really cool to have new, fresh live action Star Wars. It really hasn't been that long since we've had it, but this just feels a little totally different, right? So this is really neat to be able to have this and introduce everyone to a new era of Star Wars. And I'm surprised how many new people are coming in on this series that aren't necessarily interested in Star Wars, but giving it a shot and getting some of their perspectives. It's kind of neat when you have that opportunity. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, we'll try to weave that into some of the conversation as we go along. But there have been some very interesting perspectives from all around, really. I mean, people that are, anti-Disney, people from anti-Disney folks giving this a shot for whatever reason, right? And some of this is resonating with them now. Of course, you're going to have the haters, and they're out there, of course, but for the most part, it's been, we'll talk about the reception and just kind of what we've seen here in a little bit. Right. But the third member who's going to be joining us tonight is our resident bookworm and High Republic expert, Lauren. Lauren, welcome to the show. Glad you can make it.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk about this show. I can't wait.
You've, we need to get your thought. I want to get your thoughts at some point here too, of course, on the High Republic and how it's depicted here, because I think some folks thought we were going to get, be steeped in the High Republic era as we've seen during phase 1, 2, and 3. And we're really kind of more in the transitional period of, the High Republic, the very tail end of the High Republic going into what we see in the Phantom Menace. So while some things look familiar, some of the stuff does not. And I think that's probably where some people are scratching their head going, well, it doesn't feel like it's really that far in the past, right?
Yeah, like you definitely see those markers of the High Republic. Like you can tell that the uniforms are inspired by that High Republic, that classic ceremonial Jedi outfit that we see in the High Republic art for the books and things like that. But it still does feel like its own era, which is cool. So you're getting a nice little taste of the old school High Republic stuff, but then also, like you said, moving closer to the Phantom Menace still.
Yeah, a little bit of both in that regard. So hey, before we get started, Jonesy, I know you wanted to say thank you to some very special people.
Yeah, all of our Patreon members. So now part of the tribe members. Raphael, thanks for joining, Raphael. Sorry I missed you last episode. So welcome, Raphael, Danny, Rob, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Reader Reborn. And of course, those of our members of the Delusion's Grandeur tier, our top tier. Now this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Daz. Thank you all so much. If you're curious about Patreon, and some of the things that we'll have coming up on Patreon, usually what we do when we have a new series is that we'll do a deeper dive on a certain subject or something like that on Sunday nights at 10 p.m. Central. So if you're curious about any of that, if you'd like to go revisit some of our trivia night that we did for Phantom Menace just recently, cantinacast.com/Patreon is the way to learn more about that. We've kind of got a tier for everybody, whether you're audio or you'd like to see us on screen, chances for you to come on the show as well. So we'd love for you to check that out. And of course, everybody that's in the live chat already tonight, we already got a lot of good conversation going on. Steph, One Up versus CPU, Diego, David, Sky, Trent, Mechanized, Alex, and Raphael's out there too. We see you folks in the background. Music Train just popped in. We hope you'll come by and say hi. Everyone kind of be respectful tonight. We know it's going to be a lot of energy, a lot of talk, and a lot of discussion. So we appreciate your supporting of keeping this a kind of a positive community for us.
Yeah, we've got a lot of comments here recently and support on the positivity of the show, and we don't plan on stopping that. So just keep that in mind as you are commenting and posting your questions. And speaking of questions, I posted this today, and we'll probably just kind of hammer this a few times this week and probably with every show going forward. But we have official Acolyte posters that we are going to give out as part of just kind of a freebie. So we've got one for every show. So here's the poster. I'll kind of hold that up right now. You've probably seen us post these, or if you've been following social media, these are the official posters that were given out during the premiere or the preview that was Monday night. So just 2 days ago, I guess, at this point. So we've got a number of these to hand out. And the way we're going to do this is you have to ask a question. And that question can be asked during the live stream tonight or after the live stream. If you're catching this already recorded, you can throw your question down in the comments. That's step one. Step two, you have to be a subscriber to the YouTube channel. And step three, you have to like the video. That's it. And starting with the next episode, which will be on the 12th, we will announce the winner for this episode here, right? So anybody that asks a question tonight, either in the live chat or in the comments between now and the next show on the 12th, will be eligible to win one of the posters. I bought 2 mailers, so I can guarantee you it's going to get there nice and pretty and safe. So, and we'll do that all the way through the course of the episodes, or the course of the show and the series, all the way into the final episode. And we'll do something kind of big when we get to that final episode breakdown. So good luck. May the odds be in your favor. Hopefully you'll get one of these posters because they are very beautiful, and it's very thick, sturdy kind of poster. It's not a little paper kind of thing. So
wrong franchise with the quote, but we'll allow it.
Yeah, well, it was in my head. It just kind of came out. Close enough. Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. Without further ado, why don't we jump into this? So first off, let me just kind of say thank you to anybody that's joined us new. We had a lot of people subscribe already, even before we announced the contest. So thank you guys for coming on board. We generally see a huge influx of new subscribers and listeners and viewers whenever there's a new series. So this is no different. If you're new to the channel, this is what we do is we really get into the weeds. So this show is probably going to go a little bit longer than even our normal show. So you're in for the long haul. So if you can't make it through all the night, that's fine.
That's kind of saying something too.
It really is. But, put it on pause, come back to it, finish the episode, because we are going to get into the weeds, and there's going to be a lot of great questions and a lot of great discussion. And no show would be without a lot of theory and speculation that we're going to get horribly wrong, but it's so much fun to talk about and do. So, all right, with that, let's talk about opening thoughts. Jonesy, I'm going to turn it over to you first. I kind of threw out 3 questions on here, and I'll just give you guys 3 questions, and you guys can roll right through them. But did you enjoy the first 2 episodes, and how invested are you in them, or the series? The second question is, who was the standout character for you and why? And your third question is, what was your favorite moment? After that, we'll get into the full breakdown.
Oh, wow. Okay. So did I enjoy the first 2 episodes? Yeah, I enjoyed the first 2 episodes a lot more than I thought I did. And actually, my first impression of the first one was not as positive, but in rewatches, actually, it flowed a lot better. I don't know why that was. Maybe I just wasn't trying as hard to enjoy it. But that second episode, I really, really liked where it was going. Some of the characters really started to come to life, which I thought was just fantastic, and it was going. So investment-wise, I don't know that I'm super invested in it quite yet, but I am interested to continue to see where it goes, and I want to see where it goes. Clearly, I'm going to, because we do this for a part-time living.
You have no choice, really, in the matter, but yes, please go on.
I'm contractually obligated. You're absolutely right. But also, do I feel like I'm compelled to watch every week? Not quite yet, but what I like about the series, and we talked about this with the Final Hype and a couple others, we knew this was going to be a bit of a slow burn type of series, where it was going to build on each other, build on each episode, build on the things that we learned, build on the dilemmas and everything else that go along with it. And it is absolutely sticking to that, exactly what we thought it was going to be in that way. So it's exactly what I expected, which when it meets that kind of expectations, I'm prepared for it and ready to move forward. So, but off to a really good start so far.
All right. And who was your favorite character and why?
This is really tough because I got about like 4. I really liked Yord for some reason. Like, it's just this brash, cocky guy who's also just got a lot of insecurity around himself, kind of trying to prove himself. Jackie is just, A, she's adorable, but then also B, she's got this smart ass attitude, which I absolutely love. And she was just funny at times. I just liked the character. I liked the dynamic with Soul. And then I think Master Soul, I think when you get to the last part of episode 1 and the second and all of episode 2, Soul just, man, Lee Jung Jae just really takes over, and you just see him come to life.
Yeah.
And the emotion, the heartache, the heartbreak, man, the line where he, maybe I failed you as the teacher. I actually kind of welled up a little bit. I was not expecting that. I was like, that was actually really sweet,
Yeah.
And
Shades of Kenobi in some ways too there, right? I mean, feeling like he was the failure.
It was, but what I liked about it, different than Revenge of the Sith, it wasn't all packed full of emotion and hurt and betrayal and everything, all of that stuff that went with it. The things that made it super powerful in Revenge of the Sith, but it was also just this moment of true kind of reflection, and it goes back to what he was teaching the younglings, of course, at the beginning of the series. About you have to kind of welcome it all in. I actually really liked that part too, because it was very much a flashback to Elzar Mann and some of the trainings that he went through after he was
Right.
struggling with things too. But that was my favorite moment though as well. So I kind of threw it in there at the end.
Okay. So were you saying then Soul was your favorite, was your standout character? Or
It was all of those. I even
okay,
like
you didn't want to pick one. All
I
right.
can't pick one because I think those three were all really strong. I also like Kamir. I like where he's going to, and Amanda Stenberg was also really good.
Yeah.
Acting in this series is actually really good, so I'm pretty pleased with that overall so far.
Okay. Nice. All right, Lauren. Lauren, it's up to you. First question: did you enjoy the first 2 episodes? And I guess how on the investment meter, where are you at this point, especially as a High Republic fan?
Yeah, okay. I loved the first 2 episodes, and I was actually kind of skeptical going into the show, and I feel like I was completely proven wrong in the best way. I was super worried about how the Jedi were going to be portrayed, and so far, I'm actually really on board. I love it that they in my opinion, they seem like they're really doing the best they can, but you can also see some of their flaws too. I feel like it's a really great balance. So because of that, I was super excited, loved it. I feel like now I can take a deep breath and just get into the show and stop worrying about how the Jedi are going to look. So yeah, loved that. I'm super invested. I mean, I found myself caring about these characters so much so quickly. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 100% on board.
So about that, like I've seen some folks, and I think it's fair criticism. Some folks said, "Look, we didn't really get to spend a lot of time with the characters. We were just kind of thrust into the midst of everything." And I really wish I would have had more time because I didn't feel like I connected. On the other side of this, I've seen comments like yourself and myself. I would put myself in this category of like, they did enough. Maybe it was the acting, right? Even though we didn't get really deep into the backgrounds and that sort of thing, but there was just something about the characters. And this is what I commented on about Monday night when I said that Star Wars' future is now in the past, and that there were a lot of great things about it. But at the end of the day, what it really kind of came down for me after watching that first viewing in the theater was the characters. There's just something about them that stood out as being unique, or they had their own quirks, or kind of like what Jonesy brought up, right? I went in fearful that there wouldn't be levity to this, and we got that with Jecki, and there were a couple of Kamir's moment as well about like, I thought he was with you kind of thing, right? It seemed like classic Star Wars where it wasn't over the top, it wasn't like super goofy silly stuff, but kind of middle of the road, and that was what allowed me to connect with the characters again, even though we didn't have the long exposition and character development that we some folks may have wanted. So
and we're gonna get there though. I think that's the thing that people need to be patient about, is I think we're going to get there with each of the characters. We're going to learn more about what it is they've experienced in the past, especially like Torben and some of these other characters that have already been killed off. There's going to be more story that gets brought to life. And I think even with characters like Yord and the relationship with Osha and whatever might be there on the side, those things are going to come to light. Those are going to bear fruit at some point, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Similar to like Andor or some of the other series where it wasn't until the latter part of the series that you really started to enjoy the characters and kind of understand where they're coming from.
Well, and the weird thing is, I mean, if I had to put my finger on, okay, why exactly are you so invested in these characters to an unusual level? I don't even know if I could explain it. It's just kind of something about them is just speaking to me. And maybe that's why there's so many kind of different opinions about if people are invested in the characters yet or not. It's kind of hard to, I don't know, to nail down what exactly it is about them that I love so much.
Yeah,
Well, speaking of
John Pedro actually had a really good question. Sorry to interrupt you, Albert. If I felt like we learned the characters, I felt like we learned the characters very early on better than most new series, and I actually kind of agree with that. You get a flavor for who each of the characters are and what their position is in the current frame. Yeah, you don't know all the backstory and all the history, but you get the vibes, right? You get the impressions and the feelings, and it does kind of whet the appetite and the interest level of wanting to learn more about them. And I agree with John. I think that is actually giving us a little bit more than what we've had in other places where I think Andor is a good experience or a good example. We had to really wait and have that stuff really pulled out, except for a couple characters. The rest, you really needed more and more episodes in order to gather that. We've got a pretty good grounding right now for just a couple.
Yeah, no, good point, John. A good point, Jonesy. On the topic of characters, Lauren, who was your standout character and why is it not Pip?
Okay, I'm having a really hard time choosing between Soul and Yord because I feel like those two characters, I feel like the contrast between those two characters makes the other one stand out more because they have their differences. So, I mean, I don't know, but I love those two characters and I love how they are together. And I almost kind of feel like Soul is representing that kind of classic High Republic non-violent Jedi, and I feel like Yord might be representing where things are headed for the future with the way that he's kind of quick to be a little bit more aggressive. So I think the fact that those two characters are working together is super cool.
That's a very interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about the dichotomy between those two characters and how they're coming, and yet they seem to work pretty well together. Some of it may just be him falling in line in terms of like master and an elder, your elder, respecting your elders kind of thing. But you're right; they're coming at these things very differently, which is interesting because I think you're right. It represents both kind of eras and what we should expect here soon. Okay, and so your favorite moment of the show of the first two episodes.
Okay, favorite moment is back to Sol and Yord, when Sol and Yord are facing off with May, and there's a shot of Yord putting his hand on his lightsaber, and then there's a shot of Sol reaching his hand out. And that symbolism, I just loved that, because that shows how these two characters, like you were just saying, they approach things differently. They're representing two different perspectives within the Jedi. And I just thought that symbolism was just awesome.
Yeah, no, it's good. I didn't catch that. Great call out on that one. I'll have to watch that again because that was I remember him distinctly going for the lightsaber kind of thing, like almost reaching for his pistol, reaching for his blaster. It's not something you typically see Jedi do, right? They wait until the very last minute because they know they're going to be able to just whip that thing right out. But he is overly cautious, or he's much more prepared, and that just kind of speaks to his character, like you said. Quickly Mechanized in the chat said actors have great chemistry. Jackie and Yord are a great 1-2 punch. I felt that their chemistry was pretty spot on. I want to see more of that. Yeah. Would agree there.
Put your clothes on.
All right. Well, we've all said that to somebody, right, in our lives. So let me. I'll give you my quick thoughts on this. I absolutely enjoyed the first two episodes. Again, I was fortunate to see in the theater on Monday night, and that was the Dolby Sound Theater. That Dolby system, like, I think I lost a layer of skin. It was so loud and it was so in your face and it was amazing. I mean, it just elevates the experience to another level. So am I vested? Absolutely. Did I think it was like the most amazing, fantastic thing Star Wars has ever done? No, not yet. I think Jonesy and I talked about this during the final hype show. I think it has the potential to still do that. And there's nothing in the first two episodes that would make me think differently. In fact, there's a lot in the two episodes that I think, could still carry on and truly rise to greatness, right, in terms of what we've seen in Star Wars television or Star Wars movies. So I'm invested in it. I really enjoyed the first two episodes. I think my standout character has got to be Master Soul. Like, I went around and thought about a couple of different characters, and you're right. It's almost a very ensemble cast, even though we haven't really had a lot of exposure and time with the characters. It does feel very ensemble-like. There was something about Soul, his Qui-Gon Jinn vibes, the wisdom that he was spouting left and right. In my head, when he's in that scene talking about jumping into the ocean and letting it take over you, I'm thinking, okay, maybe Elzar Mann at some point has a Padawan, and he's part of that lineage, and he's recalling some kind of analogy that was passed down from Elzar that originated with Elzar or something. But there's just something about that old school following the will of the Force kind of thing that seeps out of him. That I really enjoyed. I thought JJ did a great job. There was something, he's got a lot of compassion that he brings. I mean, it's kind of one of the character traits of a Jedi. You want them to be compassionate, and he is just soothing just seeping with compassion throughout this episode, beginning to end. So loved everything about him. And then as far as my favorite moment, I'm going to go kind of, I don't know, I would say vanilla. I like the action sequences. I really did. And I thought the fight with Adara and May was probably the better of the two fights. One was probably more emotional than the other, of course, but I really enjoyed everything about it. I loved the choreography. I loved a lot of what we had already seen, unfortunately, because we had seen it as far as the Celebration trailer. Some of that was in there. So it wasn't anything new. But I think for people going in for the first time and seeing this, I think that really had a significant impact. And it looks like it's going to continue to be that way, especially now that we know there's something about killing a Jedi unarmed, which we'll dig into in just a little bit. But that seems like, of course, it's going to pop up again. And we're going to continue to see more great choreography. So I'll leave it at that.
I wonder if the fight scene would have, we saw basically all of it, right? There was only a very small part that we hadn't seen. I wonder if it would have, maybe it's just we'd overexposed to it. We had seen it in so many TV spots and trailers that it just didn't have that same punch that it did. But then again, you saw it in the theater, which when I saw the preview in the theater was absolutely a different experience than watching it at home as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that was a big part of that too.
Could be. Could very well be. All
Hey,
right.
real quick
Yeah.
before we get started, what
Yeah,
y'all
yeah.
think about the music? Like, this is the one miss. Maybe if there were a couple moments we'll probably talk about that whether they worked or not, but the music kind of feels like a bit of a miss to me. Am I off on that one? It was very unassuming, very kind of under the radar, I think. But I was wondering if it really did it jive for you with the rest of the episode? Not to be negative about it, but I'm just to be kind of honest about it.
I'm
I
gonna
really liked it, honestly. There were
Okay,
kind
okay.
of some little parts of it almost kind of made me feel like the music almost reminded me of sort of like the prequel music. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, there were
But
definitely moments of it. Yeah.
yeah, just kind of like the way that they would insert some things. There were moments that it just kind of had me thinking about that. But yeah, I liked it.
I would say too, like I get what Lauren said. I picked up on more of a. This one felt more John Williams to me, and I'm going to use air quotes there, than many of the other ones. Even though I know he did the Kenobi theme, and there was some stuff that was inspired in Ahsoka, and we went on and on about the Kiner brothers and what they've done so far.
Right.
But for whatever reason, I think this one felt more Star Warsy. I'm going to use that again, or more John Williams. But you're right; it was a little bit more subdued than I think we've heard. Like when you think of Andor, even as as that some of that music was so powerful, and there's some banger tracks that just stood out to us that were earbuds for a very long time. And I think you could probably say the same thing about a lot of the other television shows. This one, while subtle, was probably more in line with it. And so I don't know, maybe, we're doing this 24 hours after it's aired. So
Right.
to be fair, there's probably between now and then, everyone else will sit with this music even longer. And I think it's going to continue to grow on us, over the next few weeks or, days or weeks, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, I think it was maybe just a lack of a big fanfare type of moment that we usually have in Star Wars. It's usually this kind of big boisterous moment, exciting. When we have a fight scene, usually things swell, and it really kept it kind of very subdued and just very kind of, I don't want to say monotonous. I don't mean in that way, but just very steady, right? It was just always under the surface. It never really peaked up very often. I agree with Lauren. I think there were definitely moments where there were more sweeping melodies and sweeping strings and things like that were going on, but we didn't really have that big brass type of sound at all that we're used to having with the Jedi and some of those moments. So perhaps that's what I'm missing. We just didn't have the peaks. We had kind of the valleys and the plateaus. We didn't really have any big peaks, and maybe that's what I was just missing. But we'll see how the rest of the series goes on. But I just wanted to get y'all take on the
Yeah.
music sometimes.
Music Train, true to his name, says there was a theme from episode 2. I think it was the Camino theme.
Okay, thank you. Because I was like, why am I thinking that? Like I was like, where am I getting this? But that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there definitely was some
Yeah.
prequel influence in that as well. Okay, and without further ado, let's get into the full breakdown. So I want to start with I'm going to call it a crawl, although it wasn't. Jonesy, you'd mentioned on Monday night when I told you, I was like, okay, there was a bunch of text on the screen. You're like, oh yeah, from kind of like when Solo. It's like, yeah, exactly. Same kind of concept here. I don't necessarily need a crawl per se. That feels more like a movie thing. And even then, I don't really care if they do it from here on out. But there were a couple things in here that caught my eye. And Lauren, I'm going to start with you on this one. It says 100 years before the rise of the Empire, it is a time of peace. The Jedi Order and Galactic Republic have prospered for centuries without war.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, wait a second. Is that really what's happened here for the last few centuries? I guess it goes back to the definition of war. What did you think about that? I guess now that everything that you know about Phase 1, Phase 2, the Nihil, Marauders, you can throw in a bunch of other stuff in there. Were they really at peace, or what did they classify as war, I guess?
I mean, I was trying to. So I will admit, the High Republic timeline, like when I'm trying to compare, okay, when does the High Republic happen? Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, compared to Phantom Menace, I do kind of get my brain scrambled. And so when I saw that, I was like trying to make it make sense in my head, because I was like, there's no way that they forgot about this whole huge book series that we're in the middle of right now.
Yeah,
So
and they do touch on it in other parts of the first 2 episodes. So.
right. So I was like, but no, I don't know how to explain it, because I feel like it was totally a war with
Yeah.
the Nihil.
Right. Yeah.
So
All right.
I'll bail you out
I
on this
don't
one.
know. Yeah,
All
I
right.
got
What do you
nothing.
got, Jonesy?
So the High Republic was 500 years, right?
Okay.
Like
yeah.
500
Literally
years.
500 BBY is when the farthest back we've gone.
Right. So how many years was the Nihil conflict? if we don't want to call it a war.
Yeah. Okay. I see where you're going with this. Probably about a year and a half, 2 years
Right.
at this point.
Right. So when you take a step back, I think we view it as a very small piece of the window. So when you look at it from a galactic scale or even from a public perspective, yeah, there was this moment and it's been 100 years. So you could do a little perspective there perhaps. But because I thought about this too. I'm like, wait a minute. Now that's kind of a big deal. Like the Nihil tortured the galaxy and where Temptation of the Force kind of went as well, the most recent one. I mean, there's stuff like it's impactful, but
They
when you
have
take
a
a step
whole
back,
section of space they've carved out for their own. You know
they
what I
even
mean?
named
Like,
it.
and
Yeah.
they named it, right? I mean,
Well, and the Chancellor refers to them as pretty much an enemy state. So
that's true too.
I mean, it's a war. I feel
But
like there's no debating that.
I think your
really
point's
big deal,
taken though. In the,
but
yeah, it's
500
about
years,
context.
right?
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I get that one. The other line in here was, but in dark corners of the galaxy, a powerful few learn to use the Force in secret. Now, I can't help but think of a Battle of Jeddah and the number of Force users that we were introduced to during Phase 2 of the High Republic. And I would assume, in the context of this and the show, given 8 episodes, and we've already, gotten through 2, I don't know that we're going to get any more. This seems like just an explanation of, hey, these guys are out here meddling around with the Force. Maybe not Sith, regardless. But any thoughts, I guess, Jonesy, that do you think we're going to see anybody else come up and suddenly they're Force users too, or any other beings that are using the Force outside of who we've already established?
No, I think this is probably it. I think the idea behind the statement though was just to basically bridge, not to bring up Cady Mundi again, but the prequel vision of that the Sith were extinct, or they're lying and hiding, they're lying in wait, that they are working in secret, they do exist. Not giving us a name to them. They don't name Sith, of course, in this crawl, but at least just to give you a flavor that there are pockets of dark forces at play that are always in play, right? And which one is actually going to surface and actually have something tangible to it, I think is really the big question. But it's just setting that stage that, yes, the Jedi are definitely in control. Yes, the Republic is definitely thriving, but there are pockets fermenting, if you will, that are definitely coming about. So really the purpose of the statement is just to reground people that, hey, the Sith, there's something that exists and it happens. They're few in number, and that's where our story is kind of going, right?
Yeah. One up says another Jedi cover-up in response to whether or not there were any wars. There's a lot of that going around, especially in this series as well. Okay, well, we open up with what we saw, I think, for the most part at Celebration and some of the during the trailer, May heading into this noodle shop of sorts. She pays an informant, which, by the way, Neil Scanlon, the guy behind all of the creature shops and stuff here, I mean, did an outstanding job. There were so many great creatures in here. That was definitely a highlight for me, I think, and stood out as far as, feeling like Star Wars. I mean, there was just no doubt about it. But
it looked really good.
Yeah. Especially this first creature, like this disgusting little Jawa-looking thing with red eyes, and he's got this ball of like liquid for his mouth. And the first person I thought of was Lauren, because I was like, wow, she's going to get that plushie. I know it if it ever gets made. But it was just so gross because
it'll
it was like,
go with my baby Rodian baby doll. Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever given a toddler a drink and they've just been eaten and they take a drink of it and all that backwash, it looks like what it looked like in there. But
oh my God.
But anyways, I thought all the creatures were great. But she walks in, and I definitely want to talk about this first part here. Because we see this a few times when she approaches Master Dara, who I assume is there. We got to remember. So one of the cool things, and necessarily wasn't really explained in this episode, but the Jedi have been dispatched throughout the galaxy, and for the most part, they're an outpost, Jedi outposts all over the place. Right. This is very prevalent in the High Republic during all 3 phases, and I think that's really what's happening here with Adara. She seems like she's probably the local Jedi for this planet on Ueda. But I found it interesting that May has approached not only her, but then later Torben by kind of trying to provoke them. She didn't initiate the combat. She didn't try to initiate attacking. She went to this whole kind of formality of like getting into a posture and saying, attack me. Attack me with all your strength, right? And that didn't provoke Adara. She's much more wiser and older and knows better. At least she thinks she knows better. And then it was attack me, Jedi. And it was only then after that she started attacking the patrons of the restaurant to provoke Adara to finally stand up and do something about her. I guess, Jonesy, any hot takes around why she's going through that and not just coming out and blatantly attacking her?
Well, first, I was glad that the patrons laughed at her because it was such a ridiculous statement. I was like, oh gosh, this dialogue is terrible, but it was so over the top terrible. It was
It was
supposed to
on
be.
purpose.
It was on purpose. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it was such a relief, and it's one of those self-aware moments of like how ridiculous the dialogue is, and everybody shares in it with you, and it kind of makes a fool of the villain of sorts. But what was the question? Like, why does she want to
Yeah.
do a direct
What's up with the
confrontation?
formality? Why is it that it feels like she has to provoke them to attack her rather than her going and attack? She doesn't. Torben's like sitting there
Yeah,
doing nothing, and she runs to that same kind of like formality.
it is a little bit odd because if she's seeking revenge, usually you just want the revenge, right? But again,
Yeah.
and what we know later on, we get some tips, of course, later on that she's trying to please the master and trying to, I don't know, win favor or prove herself in this way. This is apparently some sort of rite of passage, is what it sounds like, right? Of trying to get them to succumb to it. I think some of it is also trying to show the Jedi for who they truly are in May's perspective, because clearly something has happened on her home planet. She blames them. We hear this with the dialogue with Torben, I think, directly. We know the Jedi kill indiscriminately, basically, or they kill those without. Oh no, she said it's a Mandara, right? Where she says, if you draw your weapon, you're going to use it, right, to kill.
She says the Jedi doesn't pull her weapon unless prepared to kill.
Right.
Which, sorry, I'll come back to that here in a little bit, but keep going. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I know it's kind of skipping ahead, but it's all relevant, I think. And, basically she responds that, a Jedi doesn't kill those who are, not armless or defenseless, and they don't do that. But she's like, she disputes that and says, yes, you guys do. This is something you do. So there's clearly something there of also trying to just show the Jedi for who she believes they truly are and let everybody else see it. This is kind of like the Nihil a little bit in the High Republic too, of making sure that the people see the Jedi for their true colors of what they truly are, stripped down to their most basic needs. I think it's one element. There's probably a whole lot more to it, but I think that's probably one idea behind it.
Yeah. Lauren, do you have anything you want to add to that or any other different perspective there?
Yeah, I took it as the master wants her to fight people and not just kill them by surprise. I think that doesn't count in the master's eyes. That hasn't really been confirmed, but that was just the way I interpreted it, is she has to defeat them in combat, which is its own kind of thing.
Yeah, unarmed combat.
We kind of see this in the Vader comic too, when he's first striking out and has to get his lightsaber and get the crystal to bleed. Like, we see a very similar thing. Palpatine just sends Vader out in order to go and fight and earn his keep and prove that you're worthy. And this is, I think, Lauren's on the money. I think from an overall perspective, that's absolutely what this is a rite of passage.
Yeah. Well, we get the big fight happening, and a lot of this we've already seen, and honestly, we've dissected already as part of the some of the previous episodes. So we don't necessarily we don't need to get into all the aspects of the fight itself. It was interesting to still see her going after the lightsabers. We'll see if that happens with Kelnaka, if it turns out that she does attack him as well, or anybody else for that matter, because I think there's something there with the lightsabers. But getting back to May, and kind of maybe more around the intent of what she's trying to do. I went with you both. I think it is primarily ritual or part of whatever it is she's trying to do to ascend or to become the Acolyte. This is one of the steps of a few that need to be done, and one of which is attacking a Jedi or killing a Jedi unarmed. And she's already failed twice, right? She didn't do it with either one of those now. The other part of it is we get some kind of clues to what her perspective is around the Jedi. This idea that the Jedi don't attack people that are unarmed, she says, yes, you do. I think that's her perspective. That's either her perspective and what she experienced, maybe with the flashback, more on that later, or this is part of the brainwashing or whatever the master has been telling her about who the Jedi are and who they really are, kind of thing, right? She just could be echoing or regurgitating whatever she's heard from the master as part of the teachings and trainings. That concept of pulling out your lightsaber and only pulling it out when you're going to use it, that goes back to the days of the samurai. Samurai would never pull their swords out of their sheaths, and if they did, they almost had to use it at that point. So that's why they kept it in the sheath as long as possible. It was only until the very end that they actually pulled it out and would use it. Again, probably her perspective. Maybe that's something that Kamir or the master, or maybe they're one and the same, told her that if the Jedi, pull out their lightsaber, they're going to kill you, kind of thing. Again, it sounds more of that, the indoctrination and the lies and deceit that they've probably been spreading about the Jedi. But they're, let's see, we'll go kind of fast forward to the fight, to the very end, really. And I did find it. Well, let's back up. Sorry, one thing. The May, when she has May kind of pinned and she's kind of holding her with the force, and she pulls down the mask, she has that moment where she looks off to the right and she's just kind of lost in the moment. It's almost as she's seen a ghost. And I think now, with the perspective of the second episode, that's probably what was going on in her mind, thinking this is the kid that we saw die. Or could it have been she's looking at her going, this was Osha who was good and now she's bad? Jonesy, any thoughts around what was going on there in her mind during that scene?
Yeah, I think it was more Osha. I think because, again, they all think that May is dead, and I think everyone pretty universally agrees with that, it sounds like. But so I think it was like seeing a ghost, though, for Osha, too, of someone who'd left them, what was it, 6 years previous? I think we learned a little bit later. And so that she just surfaces and is trying to wreak havoc and kill masters. It just doesn't make sense, right? So there's a little bit of surprise there, too. And, of course, Indara and Soul are friends, and so there's a certain connection there that goes along with it.
Yeah. There's at the very end of this fight, she kind of puts her in a no-win situation. This is kind of what they do to Superman and superheroes in general, right? You give them a no-win situation, either save all these people or let this one person you love die, kind of thing. And in this instance, it was the shopkeeper or the noodle keeper. Is that a word, noodle keeper? But it was that guy, right? And of course, she throws the dagger towards her, and while in the process of saving the life of them, she gets the dagger into her chest. And I've seen people already complain about, oh, how did she survive that when all these other Jedi have survived? I don't really care. That's not, you're missing the whole point of Star Wars if you're getting, lost in the details of who lives and who dies based on where they've been attacked. But this was in the heart, so I think it's pretty safe.
It was right in the heart.
Right in the heart of it all.
Blade was a little bit longer than I originally thought it was. I thought it was like a really short dagger, but I think it was about, I don't know, probably 4 inches or so long, 3-4 inches.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a small blade. Let's just leave it at that. So, yeah. So she falls to the ground. She's dead. I guess any thoughts around this? Because I do find it interesting, by the way. I don't know if anybody caught this. When we flip to the next scene, which is May waking up for the one of like 4 times in the first episode. But when she wakes up, she's actually clasping at her chest in the exact same position that Indara was stabbed in. But any significance to that, or do you guys want to add anything before we roll into the next scene?
Oh, I didn't catch that. That's cool. Something I did want to add, though, is when they're having that back and forth in that scene when Indara is like, or a Jedi doesn't attack someone unarmed, and May's like, yes, you do. Something else I wondered as well is I wonder if this could also be a reflection of the changing times. Like maybe Indara has kind of more of that old school kind of view of we're nonviolent, and then maybe some of the younger Jedi are a little bit more aggressive, kind of like Yord is, and maybe that kind of differing claims that the two of them are putting at each other. I wonder if that could be representative of that.
I actually like you pointed that out, because I saw that too. Like Indara was very hesitant to bring her lightsaber out at all, which is very synonymous with the master level in the High Republic that we're used to in the books, which was very consistent. But then, like you said, with Yord, man, this guy's got his lightsaber out all the time. He's always reaching for it. He's clearly attached to it, and it feels like it's really, it feels like it's an extension of who he is, and everything's on the defensive. He wants to prove himself. But so there's definitely a dichotomy, and some of that's probably youthful enthusiasm, and he's still a young knight, but I caught that as well, Lauren. I think that's a interesting one to kind of watch to see how this works, because we see it with Soul too, right? Soul doesn't break out his lightsaber at all yet, and when the fight was going on, and had no reason to, and they both challenge her, like, why do you attack me without a weapon? That doesn't make sense, right? But
yeah.
And somewhere along the line, the perspective does have to change before we get to the Phantom Menace, because in the Phantom Menace, we see a lot more lightsabers. And in the rest of the prequels, I mean, a lot of lightsabers is kind of an understatement. So I feel like it makes sense for that perspective to be, as the knights are younger and we're kind of moving through time, they're kind of getting a little bit closer to what we see in the prequels.
Yeah. One of the since we brought it up, one of the mini fights I've had in the last 24 hours online has been around this subject of why didn't Indara attack her and kill her immediately? Why didn't Soul do this? And I think all the points you guys have made have been valid, but we have to remember that in this era, and I'm not trying to be pretentious here at all, this is just something they've really hit home during all phases of the High Republic so far. The Jedi go through like painstaking steps to not kill anyone, to the point of where it gets so annoying. Like,
you took the words right out of my mouth.
Kill them. Like, why are you so like, and it's just like after, and you remember, context is key here, right? We've had the better part of 3-4 years now of novels, and so it's easier to get on board, and you have that much runway to get on board with. But it is to the point where, like, you now know that the Jedi of this era will go through whatever they need to not kill anybody, and then even after, this person has caused all kinds of pain, has caused all kinds of harm, has killed all kinds of people. After they do, dispatch them, they're suddenly like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just killed that person. It's a loss of life. And I love that for the Jedi, what they're doing in here. But it's a very, very different era than what we see, like from Yord. That was a great point call out there. And then certainly very different by the time we get to the era of the Phantom Menace. That's just who they are, right? You have to accept it. And yes, I know they didn't explain it, and they should explain these things, or maybe they shouldn't, but just take us for our word. That's just who the Jedi are. We're still seeing bits of that linger even on during this era.
I mean, you don't want them to explain every little thing though, because then you're insulting your viewers.
Yeah.
Like people can, I don't know. I feel like if you give it time, like some of these things will come to light more.
Right.
Like you don't have to read all the High Republic books to know. I mean, it's nice if you know it going into it probably, but because with Soul, we see Soul do the same thing. So I
Yep.
don't know. I feel like if you just give these things time, they kind of become more clear.
Yeah.
Although I will say this though, and we're gonna get to this eventually, is the Soul kind of letting Chimere off the hook with a warning later on. Like I can't wait to dig into that, because it's very much this conversation of like, what are you kidding me? So we'll put a pin in that and come back to
Yeah.
that conversation too in the next episode, because that was a bit of a head scratcher moment too for a lot of people, I imagine.
All right, well, let's move to the corporate sector. CorpSec is what they are. CorpSec, I think is what they call it, which is the corporate sector of space, which is where all of the businesses have gone. It's just, think of it as like Wall Street, or I don't know, Silicon Valley of sorts, right, in space. And this is where we find Osha. And as part of, she's a mechanic working on this Nemoidian ship. I love the Nemoidians. I thought they did a good job. Music Train asked this question: what did you guys think of the CGI Nemoidians? Well, I didn't realize they were CGI. I thought they were practical effects, but I could be wrong on that.
Maybe a combination.
We were totally right. They were going to keep the mismatched lip syncing too. So.
Right. But they ditched the voices, I guess the stereotype voices, which I thought was a good move. So to see that. But yeah, she wakes up. We were first introduced to Pip, who I thought is a great kind of little design. I hope they do more with them, because it seems, without being mobile, the droid feels like, it just gets carried around like I don't know.
No, he's the sonic,
like a
he's the sonic
phone.
screwdriver.
He's like a phone. He's the old iPhone, but
well, he's the sonic screwdriver for Doctor Who, basically.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, I can see that.
That's more fun than a phone.
Yeah, than a phone, right? So she wakes up. Again, she's gripping her chest as she does so. She runs into her fellow mechanic named Philic. And they have a Nar Shaddaa. There's 2 references, by the way, from SWTOR, or the Old Republic, that I'm just geeking out about. They mentioned Nar Shaddaa. Later on, there's a Selkanth that you see. I'll gush about that here in a little bit. But I've seen a lot of debate and discussion around whether or not we were meant to be misdirected and thinking that, okay, we just came from this scene where Dara dies, and now we're saying, oh, she really wasn't, she didn't go out with her buddies. I didn't really pick up on that. Like, it felt very clean and clear to me. And if it was an attempt to misdirect, it was kind of weak in my opinion. I don't know if that was really what they were going for, but you guys have any thoughts one way or the other on that?
I didn't piece that together. If that was the intent, it just seemed like, no, I didn't go out because that's just not her character.
Right. That's how I was picking up on it.
Yeah, to me it seemed kind of like I had like maybe a moment of being like, huh? And then I was like, oh, they're twins, and then moved on. Like I don't know.
Right, later on. Well, and all that gets washed away.
That's the thing. Like they ripped the Band-Aid off the whole twins and sisters and all of that stuff, like right off the bat. I mean, there was no preamble. Of course, we got it in the teasers and stuff too, but they just rolled right into it. There was no preamble. There was no mystery really with it. And the Jedi figure it out relatively quickly as well. So I was a little surprised that didn't play out a little bit further.
There's not to digress too much here, but there's an interview that just came out either yesterday or today with Leslie Headland and Amanda Stenberg talking about the cover up and the twins. And the way I read that was, yes, it's like they were trying to kind of play up on that, and that's why they released the poster the way they did and didn't really say anything about it. I think it was a slip up that the YouTube comments highlighted Osha, and that's why they redacted that and pulled it off the subtitles, or the subtitles.
Closed caption. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was a formal word I was looking for. So I think that was part of it, but it did sound like also on top of all that, this really wasn't the mystery. Like the mystery, the bigger mysteries,
Yeah.
the more, the bigger mysteries of the series are still to either have already, the groundwork's been laid or still to be revealed. So this was just kind of a fun thing to keep in wraps for the first episode. If that was the case, they would have drawn this out, right, to the 4th, 5th episode, that kind of thing. Throwing it up front like this just lets you know that, okay, this is not where it's just misdirection. And we know that they're twin sisters and we can move on for it. And so I'm all for it. I think people have put too much into that at this point now. But
I had the same thought. I felt like it was the reason that they just got that out of the way is so they could tell the bigger story that was behind it. So they had to address that real quick, and then they could actually get on to the bigger mystery.
yeah. Let's talk about, so they go out and of course they're repairing shield generators. Apparently it's illegal for humans to do this, which I don't know if that's just a nod to the RT units that we see during the Phantom Menace, repairing the shield generators as they're trying to get away or escape from Naboo. But nonetheless, there's a moment in there where there's an explosion and there's a fire. And I think what I really want to focus in on is the conversation that Osha hears. She has kind of like this PTSD moment, this flashback, and there's some voices that are going on here. And I want to read these, and I want Jonesy, I'll start with you because I want your thoughts around this. But you hear young Osha, that's how it's labeled. Young Osha say, "May, what are you doing?" Then it says girl, which I'm assuming is Osha, but I don't know. But it's another girl says, "I won't let you leave. Mama, help me." Then the same girl says, "No." And then she screams, "Mama." And then you hear, then the subtitles just say young Osha screaming. So I don't know if there's too much to read in this, but I'm assuming this is just part of what was going on during the fire on was it Bendock? I forget the name. Brendock. Thank you. There was an R in there. Brendock. But any clues here to what we could possibly be seeing here when we get the formal flashback, if we indeed get it?
Yeah, I'm glad you read it out because it was kind of chaotic to try to follow it on screen. Even with the subtitles on, it kind of happening pretty quickly. I think this is probably just setting the scene of, I think some of it's like, are we getting a full picture even in these quotes in this kind of PTSD moment of like May has been accused of setting the fire and causing the death to the family and to the mother and whomever else, but it's really unclear if that's actually going to be true or not, or if it was something more to it. But it certainly seems like they've caught her in the act in some way. But so I don't know. It might just be her interpretation of it, but I'm kind of taking it at face value for right now, just because we don't have much else to go on.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see more of it when we get the formal flash. And I assume we're going to get a formal flashback, and we'll actually get to see what happened. If not, someone will narratively explain exactly what happened.
This feels like Last Jedi, right? This feels like the story between Kylo's perspective and Luke's perspective.
This is the Rashomon effect that we've been talking about.
This kind of feels like, yeah, and at least in this moment, we're going to have that, but I think we'll also have it in some of these other flashback moments too. But this one seems like a really great candidate for that.
And Neil on point talking about the next scene here that kind of had a freak out moment, but we get to see the Jedi Vector fly in off screen. Very small, short scene that we see it in. It's literally on screen for all of about 2 seconds. But I don't know. What about you? Were you screaming, Lauren, when you saw this?
That was awesome. Yeah, I loved the little High Republic Easter eggs that we got.
Yeah.
Every time I saw one, I got excited.
Hopefully we'll see more of them. At some point, I'd love for there to be a space battle. I don't know how we get there based on where this series is going, but
right.
A space battle with a ton of, vector ships would be pretty amazing and fun to watch. We're then introduced for the first time to Yord Fandor, his Padawan Tassie Loa, who I think her name was in the credits. She says something in one of the trailers, and I think we mentioned Tassie as the name, but we didn't know who it was at the time.
Right.
I hope she's safe. Like, she doesn't show up again after this scene. But I'm sure she just went back and she's not ready. But nonetheless, great to see them walk in with their temple robes, which is the formal name of the gold and white robes that they wear before again, we're in a transition period. They're going to eventually ditch those and just go to the plain old drab, Tatooine bum robes that we see in the Phantom Menace. No offense to anybody that likes those. But they say they're looking for Osha and Asia. So we threw out this during the final hype show. One of the theories we had was whether or not Mother Anasia was the mother of Osha and May, like literally the biological mother, because she has the last name. We said this too, to be fair, like 2 weeks ago, that it was either that or they've adopted the name of Anasia as their last name. But Jonesy, any thoughts around whether or not did anything change your mind or sway you one way or the other? I think someone mentioned also earlier on. Let's see, Mechanize said she has the same tattoos as the mother. I think they reacted to that also, talking about Adara reacting to the tattoo that we see on May's forehead.
May's forehead, yeah. I mean, some of that could be attributed to the clan, right? To the group, to it is a family, and they all maybe adopt the same last name. Could be one perspective, but it definitely seems like there's a better bond. We know there's going to be some scenes later in later episodes that have one-on-one, so it will be curious to see where, if we get that clarification. I assume that we will, but again, that also presumes that her character is dead. And I thought that we saw Mother Anastasia more in the current present, but maybe not. Sometimes it's a little tough to see from the backside if it's a young version or older version of the.
Yeah, I think we theorized that we would, but I don't know. It's hard to get there right now, given what we know. But I may change my opinion on that. So they approach the Nemoidians, and of course they're looking for Osha. They can tell the Nemoidians are about to, lying, trying to throw up a front. And I thought it was interesting that Yord, and when you guys have already highlighted this, right? Just his, his formalness, or the way he just kind of went in and started using a mind probe, which, by the way, like, the use of the mind probe is not something that typically, at least the Jedi that we know by the time we get to the Phantom Menace, it's not something they go around and throw, right? They use it more for, Kenobi does it, but he's using it towards stormtroopers. These are the evil guys. There's intent there. There's a more noble intent there. But there's just something about the way Yord came across and did it that was a little shocking for me. I don't know. Did you pick up on that? Or how did you feel about that, Lauren? Was it you're the same way, or were you okay with it?
He does not waste any time. He's like, we are getting this resolved right now, and you're gonna answer me. So I don't know. To me, it makes sense for the character. It was, in comparison with some of the other Jedi, it was pretty quick that he's like, okay, if you're not going to cooperate, then I'm just going to go ahead and do this and get this over with. So that was, it seemed a little quick, but it makes sense for the character, because he does seem like he's very much like, get in there, get it handled. Where's Osha?
Yeah, and we talked about the differences between, I guess, the two different approaches and takes between Soul and Yord. But at the same time, we see examples of Soul doing it too, right? He kind of runs in and
I think that
uses the
different.
Force.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit different. And I don't think Yord actually did it, actually.
No, he was about to, though. But I think the Nemoidians knew. That's why the other one jumped in, and she's like, sub-level bunk 23, like, please don't do that to us, kind of thing.
Right, yeah. And in the subtitles, of course, he did say cooperation. It wasn't quotes. They didn't kind of have quite the sarcasm, I think, in the audio file, but
gotcha.
It was there. But yeah, I don't think he actually did it, but definitely the threat was there. I wonder if he actually would have gone through with it, or if he was
good point.
If he was just posturing a little bit too, because the Jedi aren't above intimidation in some ways. And we know from, I think the Living Force was like this, there's a lot of stories about the Jedi and what they're able to do. And we see some of that with the prisoners. And so I think just the mystique around the Jedi sometimes is enough to scare you into submission without, you really don't have any intention of doing it. And I think what we see Soul do a little bit later is a little bit different than a mind trick. But maybe we can talk about that.
It's a more extreme situation.
I viewed that one as more as like he's calming him down to give him more clarity, rather than actually influencing him in some way to force him to, like an actual traditional Jedi mind trick where it's like, no, you want to go and push the button or something like that.
Oh, I was thinking I thought you were referring to when he is trying to figure out who May's master is.
Yeah, well, there's two. There's that one, and the one for May I think is probably the same. But Jonesy, you're right. I think what he does to the convict, the out of control convict, is probably more what you're saying, more of a soothing, incapacitating kind of thing, right? Mellowing him out so he can talk, clearing his mind. But so they go and they finally meet up with Osha. There's an interesting conversation that goes back. Then we kind of learn a few things here. We learned some things about Yord. He just made Knight 2 years ago, which seems like he's a little bit too old, but who knows why that is. Especially knowing that the Guardian protocols are likely still in place, and so he would have probably come on as a Jedi Padawan, or he would have been knighted. He should have been knighted much earlier. So I don't know what the story is there.
Yeah, Lauren, how long in the High Republic? How long did Padawan? Don't they stay Padawans for much longer in the High Republic era, though?
Well, there were some that were made knights pretty quick because they needed more knights.
That was the Jedi, the Guardian protocols.
That was the protocols.
Yeah, expedited when they would be knighted. In fact, there's one panel. Sorry, I was just saying there's one panel in one of the comics. I think Laura you and I talked about this one where there's a Jedi that's standing there and he's like listening to the Jedi, the Guardian protocols being announced. And they question, they're like, am I even ready? Like,
yes.
To do this? Like, why are they making me a Jedi Knight? I'm not ready, kind of thing.
And the drawings of those kids look super young too.
Yeah.
So, but I think that when everybody's being made a knight at the right time and people aren't being rushed into it for military reasons, I feel like Padawans are supposed to be a little bit. I mean, like if I'm just thinking about Obi-Wan.
Yeah, it was 22, 25, something like that.
Yeah, it's probably more in line with
Yeah.
Yord, I would say.
Yeah, because if I'm thinking about Obi-Wan and he was made knight at what seemed like an appropriate time for himself, and rather than just we need more knights, then it seemed like Padawans would stay Padawans for a little bit longer at that point.
Yeah. We also learned that Osha left the Jedi Order 6 years ago. She became a mechanic, and she joined the Jedi Order when she was 8 years old. Older than, I think, still what they would like. But there's an explanation for that, right? Which we'll get into here in a little bit. That makes sense now. There was, they talked about the concerns that they had because she was older coming into the Jedi Order and how she was still mourning. Some of this comes out a little bit later when Sol's talking to her about her past and the grief that she has and the anger that she has towards May. And they start really kind of digging in and almost, they start asking her about her attachments and, having lost her sister and her family in the fire. And Yord has I don't remember if it was Yord or what's her name, the little Padawan that says this, but attachments to those we have lost are the most difficult to let go. I think that was Yord that said that.
Right.
Now we know why he's saying that, right? They're trying to tease out whether or not she really was, being revengeful and could have been the person that committed the crime against Indara. But that was an interesting. There's so many examples that came to mind when I heard that quote of people that have had attachments to people that have died and passed. Anakin being one of the bigger ones, I guess.
I mean, yeah, grief and any kind of mourning and just trying to get over something and not being able to let go of it, right? Whether it's something you felt like you could control or something that happens to you, and especially if it's someone that you felt like you trusted and in family, and then your family turning on one another. That's a lot of trauma to deal with, and it sounds like she struggled with it for a very long time as part of the Jedi Order, and it's whatever reason didn't work out.
We also learned that Adara was trying to convince the council to stop her training, likely because of the attachment, because of the grief that she was going through. So this, of course, plays into the revenge aspect of everything for May. And then we also learned that Osha left the Jedi Order on her own accord, which I thought was very interesting. I don't know if we'll ever get the context around that, but I am intrigued and want to know more there. Any thoughts before we get to the Jedi Temple and Fernesta Row?
Well, the whole thing with it that you were just talking about with Indara and Osha had me thinking, I wonder if, Indara was like, this is not working out. She's not doing great. And Osha was just like, yeah, I agree. I'm not doing great. And this isn't working out. And then just decided to bow out. I mean, maybe that'll be confirmed later on, though.
Yeah, I think knowing what we know about her character, there probably was some self-awareness there, and probably she did feel like that was the best route. We've talked about this on shows in the past of like what happens to Jedi who don't make it. They're so force sensitive. What happens to it? And I think they've done a pretty good job of explaining some of that in the High Republic. We see them get relegated to roles where they're out on some kind of outpost and they're just paper pushers, right? They still need a Jedi presence there, but they may not necessarily be the right kind of Jedi to be negotiating, diplomatic situations or sensitive situations or conflicts of sorts. Maybe they're just a mechanic. Maybe, they're in the kitchen or the librarian, although Jocasta knew and it turned out to be a badass. But you know what I'm saying? Like there are other roles that they can have rather than putting them on the front line and being the face of the Jedi Order or the face of the Galactic Republic is all I'm saying. Okay. Speaking of which, we go to the Coruscant Temple. We're introduced to Master Sol. We get to see in its totality the scene where he's, teaching the kids. They didn't put eyelids on that one child, that poor child. I really wish they would have just CGI'd some eyelids on him so he could close his eyes.
I didn't even catch that. I'm going to have to go look at
Alex
that.
texted me, my brother who's in the chat tonight, texted me immediately. He's like, they didn't put any eyes on him. They could have done the CGI. So I don't know. I don't know how he closes his eyes, but I'm sure he finds a way.
Maybe he doesn't need to. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I love the lesson. I think I've already talked about the Elzar man analogy that we hear there, and in my headcanon, he's part of that lineage of Padawan to Master. Hopefully that happens. Okay. But Vanessa Rowe walks in, and this is our first exposure to her. Now, I will say this. Let's get this out of the way. I was not expecting the Vanessa Rowe that we got. She seems very much of the institution, very formal, very much, she was very concerned about the public eye, what her enemies thought. She wanted to convene in a council later on. It was very different. And I get it. I mean, 116 years or 115 years or whatever it is 100 years, I guess. I'm sorry. 100 years has passed, and we don't know what she's gone through, right, in that totality. So I can see it. I don't have a problem with it. I was just going to call out. I was very shocked to see where we got her, given where she's been now in phase 1 and phase 3 of the High Republic. Lauren, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. She's very much just about bigger picture. Like at one point she mentions, "Oh, we don't want our political enemies to know about this because it's going to look bad." She's very yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know really what I think of her yet. I feel like she wasn't really giving us a whole lot other than just like, I don't know,
Yeah.
very bland kind of Jedi council. I mean, was it confirmed? Is she on the council now?
Was not confirmed. I was going to ask Jonesy that follow-up question because you and I had a discussion about this during the final hype show about whether or not she was part of the council. I think she is based on what we're seeing, but anything that drove you one way or the other on that?
I think she is because he's having to ask her permission for a lot of things.
Right.
And she's kind of telling him what to do. So
Yeah,
I
she's
don't know
kind of
what you
calling the
think.
shots. Jonesy, you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yeah, she's convening a council, clearly saying, dictating the size of the council, how many people, hey, we need to do this with discretion a little bit later on. So she definitely seems like she's in a position of influence and power. So it seems to make sense that she's on the High Council and one of the more senior members. I mean, not all Jedi, we named this before, only a handful of Jedi lived, all the way from this period all the way to the prequel trilogy. So you can imagine it's still not that many that are continuing beyond the council that live beyond a standard humanoid lifespan, right? So
Right.
you figure that she's probably one of those people. So it all kind of points that direction. I agree.
And I don't know how much longer she has. Like, I don't know what the Maryland lifespan is. They're kind of rewriting
question.
history.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, we knew it was longer than humans, but she looks pretty darn good for 116 years old. And, we know that, does she live, up till the time of the Phantom Menace? I think the answer is no. Whether she dies or not in this will to be determined. I expect her to have a bigger role later on. Like, it feels like something they wouldn't have cast her. Of course, we've got the scene with her using her Force Whip later on. So she's going to play a bigger role in this, a more integral role. So maybe we see more shades of her, more angles and dimensions to her character. But right now, she does feel like a cookie cutter Phantom Menace kind of Jedi by the book, steeped in the dogma of what we see with the Jedi Order during that time, which is, again, not what I wanted, but I get it. It makes sense to me, I think.
It was kind of hard to see her actually like this, very wooden,
Yes.
right? And not a lot of emotion. She gives a little bit later on, but
Yeah.
not enough to what we're used to 100 years prior in her life, where she's a very dynamic character and she's, I don't want to say beaten down by the system, but she's definitely invested in the system now. And of course, she's seen some stuff too, right? So
Right.
that all goes into it. But it was a little tough to see this side of the character. It was a little sad and I think a little disappointing that way, but it makes sense. I'm not saying I'm disappointed in just what they decided to do. It's just you always want to see the people in their heyday too. And we'll have some moment of that for her here in a few episodes, I presume.
Yeah. The last thing on this, because I don't think we're going to get a really good chance to talk about Vern anymore, which I'm going to call her Vern because that's how they call her in the comics or in the books. I guess I was wanted to see more of Stellan Gios, right? That's her master. There's something about, I wanted to see more of that influence. And I think there's bits and pieces of it. Stellan Gios was kind of, he was kind of the ultimate Jedi. I don't know. There's different ways you could probably take that. And I think we saw shades of that here in this character, but it almost feels like it's to an extreme, or at least the lighter sides, the softer sides, the non-wooden sides feel like those have been kind of, banged out at this point because of what she's gone through and, who knows, over the last 100 years.
Well, I could see a little bit of Stellan though, because that is kind of one of his flaws, is he does get a little bit at one point kind of caught up in the council and like the
Yes.
institution, and then he kind of has to remind himself to walk that back a little bit. So I could see her kind of going through the same thing maybe.
Yeah. All
It
right.
also comes back to kind of where we're at in prequel, where they've started to distance themselves from the living force. And we could maybe even apply some of that here as well.
Yeah. That's a good point too. There's definitely some things that are being echoed in that book as well. All right. We also learned, they kind of have the conversation where Soul says they saved Osha from the fire on Brendock. He at this point he feels like this is a mistake. I know what I saw. I knew who she is, kind of thing. But of course there are some doubts given what's happened. And then we get the cover up, which feels like a cover up, right? Vern telling him that we can't. Lauren, you pointed this out here about wants to make sure that nobody knows about this. Jedi killing Jedi. Not only is it bad optics, but it exposes ourselves to our enemies, which I was like, who are the enemies? I guess they're political at this point because I don't know that they're necessarily up against.
She did say political enemies.
Okay,
so,
she did. All right.
Yeah.
So political enemies, that makes sense. But then she says that she wants justice and she wants to make an example of somebody, which again, these are the things I'm like, wow, that's not what I would expect from Vern. But, given her position and the amount of time and all the other stuff we've already talked about, it makes sense at this point.
Kind of feels like Wrong Jedi, doesn't it?
Yes. Very much like that, right, from the Clone Wars. Okay, we get to the prison transport. So this is where May is. Well, I guess before I do that, you guys have any other questions? Anything else? And you want to bring up about all of that? Okay, so they've already taken her a prisoner. She gets put into this prison transport that is run by droids, and I don't understand why so many people are upset that there were not humans or beings on there. This is something they've always done. And we even see it in The Mandalorian all the way.
I was about to say, isn't that
years
in Mandalorian?
Later? I know. You can call it a fault, I guess. And I can see where it's, a misstep.
Had some humans on there.
Well, they had one.
But
yeah.
it was largely...
Lancer.
It was, Matt Lanter, right? It was largely droids. Yeah.
Maybe that's why they put that one on there.
Yeah, they're like, okay, well,
this.
from now on, let's just put at least one human on there because this keeps happening to us. Kind of
I'm
thing.
sorry, these droid chair things were like the coolest things ever, by the way.
They were. I loved them.
Like that was just a cool design. I was like, okay, they're droids. And then when they actually transform back into a chair, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm on board with this.
Yeah.
I want one of those.
Your inner 80s child is screaming out right now for the Transformers, for those droids. But
I made the sound in my head and all.
Yeah, look at there's Gary Smith right on cue. He says Transformers. Yep, that's exactly what they were. But so May's in this kind of holding cell now. She's got two groups. On one, there's that kind of crazy guy that's got the parasite thing on his face, and that's subduing him. And on the left, she's got like this horde of characters that we saw in the trailer, and then we were kind of talking about. Eventually they show up in the prison down on Coruscant during the Jedi Temple, and they're planning an escape, right? And it's all part. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time wondering like how did they plan this and et cetera. I know people have kind of dissected that and talked about it as kind of being a low point. I don't really see it. I don't really care. It's again, you're kind of getting round up against around the axle when there's really nothing here to discuss. Right? This happens a lot. But you guys want to touch on that, or should we just keep going here?
I mean, Osha ended up in a prison where a bunch of people who had already been there were planning some crazy thing. To me, that's just all that there is to it.
Yeah, we don't know how long they've been there. We don't know the circumstances, and we don't have to know. It's not.
I don't need to know every little thing. I actually get kind of annoyed if they hold my hand and explain every little thing to me. Like, I feel like as a viewer, you just need to kind of have some things either left up to the imagination or figure some things out for yourself. Like, I don't want every single thing explained.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. To me, I could do without that explanation.
I'm breaking away here to Gary. Actually, with a critical eye, I recant say GoBots. Given the lack of articulation, I'm with you.
Definitely look like the cheap version of Transformers.
The cheap version of the Transformers. Their wrists didn't even bend. Okay. All right. So the prison break happens. We won't get into all the details, but what we know is I thought it was great that Osha tried to save the crazy guy, even though she probably didn't deserve to live. She got burned by that, which I think you would expect to happen in Star Wars. But I did find it interesting later on when Soul is interrogating that crazy guy. He does say that he sensed the darkness, or he felt the darkness or something. I want to kind of just talk about it in the context of what we're seeing right now. There was nothing in there that she did physically that would have made me think there was any darkness in her. But Jonesy, any thoughts, theories of why that guy was saying it? Or is he just crazy? Is he just kind of spouting whatever's in his mind?
I think he was just crazy because they kept spouting the evil Jedi killer, and they were making up all sorts of stuff through the hallway. You turn on the subtitles, you'll see all of the stuff they keep saying about her. It was just nonsense. So I didn't think any of that because again, we don't see any of that on screen. And of course, she goes back and actually does the right thing and does it. And I think really aside from that, it's also that she can't seem to use the Force, right? Is,
Mhm.
I think, the other takeaway from that.
Well, question, and Lauren, I'll put you on the spot. Do you think at some point we will see her get in touch with the Force again? And follow up question for both of you. I'm curious. Will she brandish a lightsaber at some point, whether it be her own or someone else's? Does she pick it up and suddenly she's forced to fight, kind of thing?
I do think we will see her use the Force, because the way that I interpreted that was that she's out of practice, not necessarily that she's not Force sensitive. Because, I
Right.
mean, she was being trained by Soul. So I think, to me, that's enough confirmation that she is Force sensitive. But in the moment when she really needed it, she was probably kind of like, oh crap, I haven't done this in forever.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, maybe it kind of left a bad taste in her mouth when she left the Jedi Order, or, I mean, who knows? But and then when she really needed it, she couldn't do it because she hadn't been practicing. So I
Yeah.
think we will see her use the Force, and I could see us seeing her use a lightsaber too. Maybe someone says she picks up.
Mm-hmm. Jonesy, they talked about I think we've talked about the atrophy, and when that kicks in, not using the
Yeah.
Force and with any kind of regularity will cause atrophy to kick in, and you kind of lose your connection with the Force.
Use it or lose it kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like meditating. The first time you meditate in a few weeks, you're like, I don't remember how to do this.
Yeah, it's like exercising for me.
Yeah.
But clearly the abilities are still latently there, right? Because
Sure,
she's
sure.
having these Force visions. I mean, you could call them dreams if you wanted, because she keeps waking up, but they do feel like vision. I mean, these are visions, right? Because otherwise she wouldn't see and get these confirmations of what's going on with May. And so I think, again, that latent ability is still lingering under the surface, but I'm exactly with Lauren. I think it was just stressful situation, haven't exercised his muscle a long time. And then Albert, to your point, exactly, haven't done this in a long time. It doesn't come back naturally. And you have to really, and again, these are moments where you're not going to be able to enforce all of that discipline and bring all that back to the table. The things that we kind of learned in the Ahsoka series for Sabine somewhat apply here, although there does seem to be a natural ability for May and Osha and some of this stuff. But clearly there's still, the Force still is very much present with her. So she will come out of this. I think she will show Force abilities. Will she use the lightsaber? I'm going to go, I'll be contrary here and just say no, she won't. I think that the character that we see later on in the trailers pulling the lightsaber is probably May. But she'll definitely use the Force. And again, I think we might see her kind of wobble a little bit here between, is she good or bad? We'll probably see some of those dynamics, because we didn't really talk about this at the very end of the bar sequence with May, when the child is hugging on the bartender's leg.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was that brief moment where, she's kind of, growling and threatening a little bit at him, kind of just intimidating. But then you could see that soften just a little bit of like, have just that little hint of remorse of, I don't want to, like, that's not right. Right.
Yeah.
And she backs off. It was really subtle and very small, but I thought it was really well done there too.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm sorry, and I apologize for not bringing that up, because I had some talking points on that. I'll just make it very, very short and say that what I took from that moment was she was going to go through and kill that noodle keeper, whatever he is.
Noodle keep.
But I think there's something about, she had the flashback, right? Something happened when we get to the past of what happened on Brendock. There was something about the fact that a small child was about to witness their parent being killed, and she went through that same kind of trauma, is why she backed off immediately, right? She didn't want that to happen to that child, which speaks to the softer side of her. We see this a little bit later in episode 2. So, I mean, the jury's out for me as far as like what her true intentions are here. I almost wonder if she's doing all this for some greater good, or just to reconnect with her sister in some way. We have a lot more to discuss here, and we'll come back to that. But thank you for certainly for calling that back out here. Holy crap, where was I? I went too far down because I was looking at something else.
Right. So we've got through the prison break. She's on the ship. She's
straps in
and crash landing time.
Yep. Finally, that scene gets explained. It was nice to kind of see all that. She gets out. Osha and Pip. She straps in with Pip. By the way, we didn't talk about his use. Thankfully, he kind of saved the day, even though he doesn't really walk or do anything. We flip back over to the Jedi Temple. And we get introduced to Jecki, who I thought was like a really standout character. She was one of the ones that was vying for like my favorites. I think if she continues down that path and what Daphne is doing with this character, I think she's going to rise up in the ranks for me. But Jecki goes to Vern, or goes to Sol and says that Vern wants to see him down in the detainment level. But she also catches him. Now, this is a good. I think is going to be a good discussion. We see Sol looking at old hollows of Osha. And Jackie is like really sensitive to this, right? It feels like she is being brought up in this new era of the Jedi where attachments are, I wouldn't say they're truly forbidden at this point, like we get to the Phantom Menace, but they're very heavily frowned upon, more than we're seeing in phases 1 and phase 3 of the High Republic. To me, that's probably what we're going to see in the rest of phase 3, right? That transition, how do we get from where we are in phase 3 currently to this scene? That's going to be explained over the next year. That's my guess. But yeah, I guess, Lauren, I guess on this, the whole, where that whole discussion about nostalgia and sentiment and, you know, her questioning why, and then finally the lesson about, you know, if we don't remember the past, we're doomed to repeat it kind of thing. I think about like the Nihil, and I think about the Nameless and some of the other stuff there. And I don't think that's where they were going with this, but I guess any thoughts around that scene and certainly the doctrine of no attachments in this era?
Well, it did make me think of a couple High Republic Jedi whose names I won't say, but you probably know who I'm talking about. Who I think their attachment is going to blow up in their faces, and that is why we end up in this position. But yeah, one thing I really like about the dynamic between Jecki and Soul is that there are some times where Soul, he'll say something as kind of like a teaching moment, but you can tell it's something that he struggles with himself too. And I feel like Jecki kind of points that out to him, but she does it in a respectful way, which is cool. So I really like the dynamic between those two characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and her youth really comes out, I think, in some of these. You do have that youthful black and white. There's not as much gray, and she's trying to make sense of that.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And filter what she's seeing her master do, who she clearly respects and values immensely. I didn't really get any sense of jealousy or anything that maybe I thought might creep in, or envy or anything like that. But it was very much of like curiosity of, I thought we were supposed to resist some of these things, but I see you doing it. That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't compute. But we again see that. I love that y'all pointed out the dynamic between her and Soul is very much one of it's kind of what you would feel like a master Padawan relationship should be. It's one of give and take. It's one of each of us learning from the other. Soul says this with the kids talking to Vernestra, of course, of saying he's excited to learn from that, you know, to be able to be taught from the students, right? And it's the gift of a master to be taught by the student, right? Is the angle of that one. So, but I like that, you know, what's her name? Jecki has this black and whiteness and still navigating it. Kind of almost feels like they're still a bit of a newer pairing. I don't know if y'all got that kind of feel. She keeps asking for permission and he corrects it. That might have just been for the show's benefit, but
yeah,
I'm really liking the dynamic here between these two, though. I think he gives her a lot of rope to play with, and she's able to explore that and really have a lot of flexibility in what she's able to do as well.
Well, and I think she does a really good job of she's a very strong and level-headed kid, but she's still believable as a kid.
Yes.
Like she's got a lot of skill and a lot of, I guess, like emotional control, but she doesn't feel like an adult. So I feel like that was like a really good touch that she's got both of those sides.
Yeah. Yeah. I would credit that to the writing and certainly the acting from Daphne on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you compare it with like Tassie Loa, right? Tassie was very arrogant and very cocksure of herself, emulating some of the stuff from Yord, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
But very certain about their purpose and everything else. Whereas you have someone like Jecki who seems to be a little bit more self-aware and a little more, her senses are definitely broadened and looking outside of herself rather than, look at me, I'm in charge, I have authority, rather than one of maybe more welcoming of other ideas and perspectives.
The next scene we get is with Soul meeting with Vernestra Roll. They're down in the detention area. We learn that the ship crashed on Karlak, which is a planet that we've seen before. The angry prisoner is who he goes and interrogates, and this is where he kind of calms him. And the guy there, he senses there's some evil in her, or some evil in him. The prisoner says he sensed evil and darkness within Osha. I didn't take that literally as like there is an evil side to her, but there seems to be, and we get this more in episode 2, there seems to be kind of some connection, right? I won't call it a dyad just yet, but there's something kind of like a Luke and Leia kind of thing where, you feel the presence of one in the other, and they say as much later on when they're going through that little rhyme that they put together, right? But that was interesting that he was able to pick up on that. I believe that guy did feel it in that moment. Because at that point, he really didn't have, he was soothed. He didn't have to say anything he he didn't have to try to get away. I mean, he was at his calm. He was very lucent. So I believe that there was some darkness that he did feel there.
He said that once he was calm. I think all he said when he was calm was more along the lines of she came back for me. She saved my life.
He's
and
the
then I
angry.
betrayed
He
her.
says the Jedi. The Jedi was evil and sensed her. He says I sensed her darkness.
That was before he got calmed down.
Sorry,
though.
you're right. Before he was
Yeah.
calmed down, I'm saying that I think he did feel something in that moment.
Okay. I think he's just bad,
Crazy.
You know what? Crazy. Yeah.
Bat crazy. Yeah.
Lauren, you're a tiebreaker. What is he?
I don't know. I feel like he might have felt something. But it's also possible that he might have just heard people talking about the Jedi killer and kind of went with that. Or maybe he did feel some darkness in Osha, but to me that's not really saying anything super, I don't know, like revealing to me though, because everybody does have darkness in them. That's been established. So I feel like it could go either way.
He's not really an informed character anyway, right? So
Right.
perspective doesn't really matter a whole
He's
lot
crazy.
at the end of the day, right?
He's crazy. Yeah. We also get Soul then tells he doesn't believe it, right? And part of I think and this is not necessarily telegraphed explicitly, but part of the reason why he's able to tell Vern, I believe, that Osha didn't do this, is because of the connection, right? Because of the attachment that he still has, he's able to connect with her and can sense it. I mean, he even literally says, "I can feel it. I can feel that she's, that she didn't die." Because Vern's like, "No, she's dead. Let's let it go," kind of thing. That's a very typical Jedi kind of decision to be made. Like, let's not spend the time and resources on there. It's a obscure planet. At this point, they're probably going to die within a few days. Just let's move on, kind of thing. I know that sounds horrible, and I'm not trying to paint Vern in that kind of category.
I mean, she was pretty blunt.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
So what did you think about Soul's comment though about taking accountability for his failures?
Well, I think he certainly feels that way. He says this a couple times.
Mhm.
I don't know the context of that. I think we'll get to learn. We'll know more about exactly what he means when we get that flashback scene, or when the truth is finally revealed. I think we talked about this earlier. We're going to get the Rashomon thing, where we're going to get different perspectives, and one story may be slightly different than the other, which may be slightly different than the third story, and then at some point we'll get the actual truth. Somewhere in all those different tellings of what happened there on Brendock, I think we're going to find out why Soul feels that responsibility, why he feels that guilt. I think we see some of that guilt in Torben later on in episode 2, and why his only recourse, it feels like he's grieving to the point where he felt like the only thing left to do is take the Barash vow and, cut himself off from everybody else, because he just can't deal with, the mental anguish and whatever happened during that flashback moment. So, but I don't know. Do you have any theories about that, or do you think it's going to be played out later on down the road?
Yeah, it was just more of a question around the impression of like did you actually believe that he was truly felt that my failure, I need to take ownership and responsibility and accountability for bringing this person in because I failed them in their training, or was it the attachment that was driving his passion towards wanting to show for herself? I think it makes sense for him to go do it, but I just didn't know if he believed it one way or the other.
Yeah.
I got the impression. Oh, go ahead, Albert.
No,
Sorry.
I do. I feel like he does he feels like he needs to take accountability because of what he did, which explains why May or whoever is after wanting to kill them all for what happened.
Yeah, and I got the impression that while he is attached, I didn't feel like he's like super completely ruled by it. Like, I do think he makes some decisions from it, but I don't think it's his driving factor is the attachment. So I felt like it was a genuine feeling that he had about the accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
All right, so they put a small, putting a little gang together, a little group together, and we get that moment before they meet up with Yord. Soul says that they need some backup, and this is where we get the lighter moment where he says he wants backup, and she's like, "Oh God, not Yord," kind of thing. And he's like, "What's wrong with Yord?" We get the shirtless scene, which I posted about today. If you haven't seen, I tried to collect everybody that I could think of that was shirtless in Star Wars and posted that. And I missed 3 people. I missed Tarkin. So JW, who's one of our Patreon members, called that one out. And there were 2 others, which names are escaping me right now. There was one of the characters from Andor, and there's a Nautilin, which I forget his name, the Jedi, the Nautilin. Anyways.
Kit Fisto.
Kit Fisto, thank you. So yeah, go out there and find it if you want to see more shirtless men in Star Wars. Okay, but we get the line where Jackie says, "Yord, put your clothes on." Definitely not impressed. I don't know. Any guys want to add to this? I thought it was a great moment. It certainly broke up the tension given where things had been going at that point.
Did Yord know that they were about to walk in?
I know.
No,
I don't think
I'm
so.
like, come on, give this guy a break. Like,
No.
he's just minding his business, and then two people show up in here.
You
Like,
saw what he was. You saw what he was doing, though, right?
He's steaming his uniform.
He's steaming his robes.
I know. But I mean, he was
the
labeled
vanity behind it, though. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, his character bio before going into this was he was kind of a by the book kind of person, and so this is probably in line from a character perspective, right? He's going to want his uniform pressed into the T and all that stuff when everybody else is kind of like, okay, that's a little extreme, but
it looks great when it's pressed, so why not press it?
It's got to fall the right way. I think it's also he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. I think from the conversation with OSHA before of, oh, you finally passed the trials. And he's like, well, yeah, 2 years ago I did. And you can tell there's a little bit of like, there's something there. And he's always that's why he's trying so hard all the time to prove himself that he's worthy of being there. And he looks the part as much as is worthy of the part too. So a lot of insecurities there for Yord, which will be interesting to see how that plays out throughout the series if they dwell on that at all.
Yeah, and we shouldn't gloss over him saying that he wants to redeem himself. Like he feels like he at least takes accountability for like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have put a potential Force user who was once a Padawan, who's wanted for murder, who potentially killed a Jedi on a transport ship with no other humans, right? He feels like that he takes responsibility for that, and he's looking for redemption here.
Or he may have been ordered to do that too. I didn't anticipate that he actually made the choice there. I think some of this he's probably just assuming responsibility for things that probably weren't even his, but he's always so overdoing it that he just takes accountability for things that weren't really his fault. He was following orders potentially. Even that may not have felt right, but that's what they were told to do, so he did it.
Alex chiming in with another shirtless person in Star Wars. Jabba the Hutt is definitely up there.
Let's leave him off the list.
No, we got to add him.
Max Rebo.
Was he shirtless?
Pretty sure he doesn't have any clothes on. But
wow. Again, never look at that guy. Same. Yeah, Chewbacca was another one somebody brought up as well. And then, of course, we have Kel Naked or Kel Naka a little bit later. So that's from Rick, by the way. Rick Villanueva on Twitter had labeled him as Kel Naked. So check those guys out. They do a great show out there as well. On I'm drawing the name of the blank on the show right now. But all right. Anyways, we get on to the next thing, and we'll kind of zip through some of this here. But OSHA wakes up, and the ship has already crashed at this point. She sees that kind of small cloaked figure and runs after it. We get kind of this is a Force stream, of course, but we're taken back to what I'm assuming was Brendok and the incident with the forest fire. Unclear to me as far as like who started the fire. Maybe it was OSHA that started the fire. Maybe it was May. All of that's going to get kind of played out again in probably the Rashomon moments. But there's when she runs into May says, "Hello, sister." And you can hear the Sith whispers in the background during this scene, which I thought was interesting. They don't really play much into it, but I thought it did catch my ear.
They're whispering OSHA's name, right?
I didn't hear it. Maybe I just heard it, but I didn't really try to go back and listen to what they were saying. But it definitely sounded like the Darth Maul whispers that we saw in the Phantom Menace and we saw sometimes in the Clone Wars.
I think the subtitles actually said OSHA, and that's why I assumed it was a link to the whispers. Yeah.
Okay. So we get, and I guess I want you guys' thoughts on this. I've not put a lot of thought into it just yet. I'm really struggling with what this actually means. But at some point when they do kind of meet up, we get the whole kind of little, I'm going to not necessarily a nursery rhyme, but the little rhyme or little poem that they put together here about you're with me, I'm with you, always one, but burn as two. I don't know if that's the right word to use given the fire.
Born as
two.
Is
it burn? Okay. Born as two. That makes more sense. Born as two, as above sits the stars and below lies the sea. I give you you and you give me. Okay. Any theories? Get the tinfoil hat out, Jonesy, if you want to at this point. But any theories around what this means? Or is it just right now as simple as, okay, yeah, you do have it out. Is it just as simple as they're connected in some way and more to be determined later down the road?
That's what I thought. They're very close, connected. They've got the twin thing. That's what I thought it meant.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. It's just they're bound at the hip. I thought I'm with you though, Albert. I think the comment about two but or born as or one but born as two was a very peculiar part of the rhyme. And that part said it just made you think about other things like, oh, is it possible that they would come back as one? This kind of reminds me of the Visions episode with the twins, that there was just something a little more unique and over the top about it than just like a Luke and Leia type of situation of being twins. So it was very peculiar. I love the rhyme though. I think this is actually really cool, but because it tells you the closeness of the two and just how maybe integrated their lives used to be or were, or how they feel totally connected. Of course, twins, a lot of times we hear this anyway, that they do feel like they've got this sixth sense between them.
Yeah.
And so this just takes it to a whole nother level, especially if both are force sensitive and they're having these kind of visions to reconnect. It's an interesting way of showing this. Which I really like these sequences. I think they're actually pretty neat and pretty engaging and interesting to see if these continue on throughout the series or not.
I've seen other theories, and I don't subscribe to them, and I'm not knocking them, but of maybe them being the same person. That's really hard to get around. I think maybe earlier on during the first episode, it's probably early moments of the first episode.
Yeah, but
I can see
it. It's pretty clear that they're shooting at each other.
Yeah, exactly. Or and then I've heard other people say, well, maybe it's a figment of her imagination, similar to like a Fight Club scenario, right? If you've ever seen that movie or read the book.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't subscribe to that. I think it is simply right now that they are very connected in some way. And you think about, the Frozen meets Kill Bill analogy, that pitch that Hedlund had. The sisters in Frozen were very connected. They were very, very close. And one was doing some kind of mean things and one was not. And yet when they were together, they loved each other. All right. They could see past a lot of that. And I think that's what we're going to get here. I wouldn't hate if they took it further and they gave us some new dimension to their relationship that we've had. I don't want to go full dyad essentially here, but some other level to their relationship that we're not aware of yet. I think that would be kind of neat to kind of see. So I don't know what that is just yet. I don't really have any good theories because it's very early on and it's kind of sky's the limit at this point. But the point here is that they are very, very close and very connected. Okay, so the last bit of that little scene there was Osha turning to a young May, and May asks if she killed Adara. May says, yes, I will kill them all. And her eyes then turn that dark blackness that we saw in the teaser and the trailers that happens to Torben. So, Jonesy, any thoughts, theories around, is that really, are they hinting that there's something there, or is it just kind of an effect that they've used in two different places that look very similar?
Actually, three different places, because some of the other sisters in the coven also have that as well, right? So I'm curious if that's just, is that a coven thing, or is there more to it than that? But that was really creepy, actually, like just the whole sequence. And she was just so matter of fact of saying, yes, I did. And I'm going to get all four of them and your dog too. And the eyes just kind of sold and finalized it all. And it was just so well done for the kid who did that scene. It was just like really perfect, I think, in that way. But I'm not really sure what to make of it quite yet. I mean, it definitely asserts that this was planned. It was intentional. I mean, if we didn't get that before, you got it in spades now. And I think for Osha, it's a moment of discovery of not only is her sister alive, but also she is doing this and it has this intent behind it. But I think the thing that maybe not talked quite enough is that, are these things going to continue to draw Osha closer to May's perspective on this, about what happened in the series of events and having her perspective shifted? Because when you look at what we've seen so far throughout 2 episodes, May might not be as bad as we think she is, but she's probably still going to be bad. Osha has a lot more wiggle room to move from this kind of pure and good-hearted person who doesn't really intend to do any harm, kind of understands, but this anger that she has towards her sister, there's a big runway of going the opposite way, whereas maybe not as much for May. At least we haven't seen the redemption type of side, rather than the path for Osha. But it's these moments right here that start to inform us, that say, okay, these are the possibilities of what Osha might see. And does she start to understand it better and move that line a little bit closer to May over the course of the series? You're on mute.
I'm interested to see if that goes as well. Okay, so let's the Osha wakes up again for the third time, fourth time at this point. She has a quick conversation with Pip, tells him that you're not going to believe who I just saw. And I think in her mind, at least in that point, even though she hasn't physically seen her, I think she suspects that May definitely is alive. And that gets confirmed in the second episode here. We jump to hyperspace here, no pun intended, and the Jedi are en route to Karlak. And we learned some more interesting things here about Soul's perspective and what happened on Brendok, at least from his perspective. I expect we're going to hear different variations of this later on, but it sounds like they were stationed there on Brendok 16 years ago for the Jedi. This didn't come out here, but we know now from the second episode that Kelnaka, Indara, Soul, and Torben were all 4 Jedi that were stationed there on Brendok. Her sister started the fire. So from Soul's perspective, May started the fire. That fire killed May, excuse me, and her sisters, her whole family, whether that's the immediate family, biological family, or the sisters, the Witch or the Coven. We don't really not sure what that extent is. He confirms that she did have a twin, which Yord was like kind of surprised that she had a twin. And later on, if we skipped over it, I apologize, or maybe it's later.
Vernestra didn't realize that either, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting because you got a member of the council, maybe, right, on the council, not aware that she had a sister. Now, you could play the argument of, well, maybe because they thought the sister was dead, that she technically doesn't have a twin sister. But the fact that it was never put in the file, that seems kind of egregious to me. It does feel like there's a cover-up and not letting people know that there would be a sister. And so the next logical question is, why cover that up? Why is it such a big secret to have 2 sisters?
And Vernestra argued against May's or Osha's training and stuff too, right? Because of the age and other things. So it seems like it would have come up as part of this conversation. So it was it was very peculiar, like that series of events of why would she not know about it when she was also the one probably pushing back on it, or it sounds like she was pushing back on it, and there were already some flags maybe in place already.
Yeah. I think we'll probably again learn more. We'll come to understand that better once we know more about the sisters and what happens on Brendok. I was just starting to think too, like we did a whole episode on prophecies, and we talked about some of the prophecies that happened and some of them to be happened. And I'm just trying to think now, were there anything that could we shoehorn these sisters into a prophecy? But maybe that's a Patreon show. Okay.
That's season 2.
Right, season 2. We'll get to that one, dear. Let's see. On top of all that, Master Soul says he saw May die, and I think this gets repeated a couple times.
This is really interesting.
Yeah, Lauren, thoughts on, did he actually see her die, or was it just kind of one of these things where, oh, this child is in the midst of this grand fire, there's no way that she could have survived, kind of thing?
I think that he believes that he saw her die. I don't think that he's lying. I think that is genuinely what he thinks happened, but he might not have literally seen her die. He might have just seen her disappear and been like, oh, no one's surviving that. I must have just seen her die. And then just kind of accepted that as the truth and then moved on. But I do agree that it not being put in the file does feel like a cover up. The question is I guess, who left it out of the file, who was supposed to add it and then decided not to. Because I almost wonder if Soul even knew that it wasn't in her file. Because I think if he knew that it was supposed to be a cover up, would he have just admitted to those people that she had a sister? I don't know. So I don't know. There is something weird about who covered it up. Why did they cover it up? But I do believe that Soul is being honest about what he actually thinks happened.
Yeah, I don't think I have any reason to doubt that he doesn't believe that she did die, even though he may not have seen the body, which is not what you do in Star Wars. You got to find the body.
Yeah.
We cut back over to the wreckage once again. This is where we see May. She sees a ship coming in, and so she decides to run off. She doesn't want to be captured again by the Jedi. They land. They do the investigation. A lot of this we kind of theorized based on the trailer. I think we were spot on with most of this. And then Soul senses something. Like they don't really explain it. They don't dwell on it. But there's something that stirs him. Maybe his connection to his former Padawan or whatever it was. But it certainly drove him off into the direction of where Osha was running. She's running away. They're quickly behind her. We get the wrong Jedi / fugitive moment there where they finally catch up with her and she's on the cliff and she falls back and Soul uses the Force to catch her. I love the fact that he pulled his fist forward, or pulled his fist back towards him. That was very Darth Vader-ish from the Rogue One hallway scene. Love that to death. And she says that she didn't do it. And that smile that he gives was very Qui-Gon Jinn-ish. There's that scene where Qui-Gon's looking at Anakin when they're talking about, I forget now if it's the midichlorian scene or whatever it is, but there was just something about his smile that was like, again, another dimension to this character that I hadn't seen yet. And it's just it's a big transformation for him. So the fact that he's that the actor JJ is that deep and can do that, can kind of convey those kind of humanistic characteristics that we would expect of Jedi, that compassion that I was talking about. Really loved to see that. The last thing is where May says, she says, May is alive. And he says, I believe you, right? He puts the emphasis on the word you. Like everything else is going on, you can poke holes in or whatever else, but my, faith in you, to kind of use a word that he uses a few times in this episode, was really poignant there. But,
and he immediately takes her word for it. He doesn't need her to convince him. He doesn't need to see if she can earn his trust again. He immediately believes her. And I actually felt like that was a good quality to Soul. Like, to me, it didn't feel reckless or anything like that. It felt like he knows who he can trust. And I just kind of felt like he had a good read on the fact that Osha was being genuine and he wasn't going to give her a hard time about that. So I really loved that line.
Yeah. Even though Yord and Jackie are, skeptical, and we see a little bit later, but Jonesy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he knows his former Padawan and just feels the genuineness, I think, of what the character. And again, from a logic standpoint, he says this earlier on with Vernestra, it just doesn't make sense, right? She viewed us as saviors. She viewed us as rescuing and protecting her and inviting them into their home and giving training and feeling like part of a family. It didn't work out, but those feelings, there doesn't seem to be any resentment, I think, is where he was going with that. So he didn't come into it from a place of just completely mistrusting her already. He wanted to believe that she was innocent. And then the more he saw and the more he felt, it just seemed to support that. But I think this was a great moment. The facial emotion that he's able to do, it's like it just switches it on. And I think from this moment, like, you just feel like you have a different Soul character. He's found a part of himself that maybe he didn't realize was missing, and maybe a part of himself that he'd been, putting aside and kind of suppressing a little bit, that brings him joy, or I don't want to say pride or anything like that, but
yeah,
there's a missing piece of him, right? And it's like when you find that piece, you make that reconnection with someone you just haven't seen him forever, and it just fills a gap in your life that you didn't really know you felt, but it gives you an extra a little giddy up in your step, and you just feel a little more like yourself. And I think we see that moment with Soul, and it carries on for the rest of this episode and the next.
All right. Well, the big moment here, the very last part of this, is the master moment.
All right, hold on. Did this feel like totally out of place for y'all? Just to ask the question.
Well,
this was the moment where I'm like, where did this come? Like, why are we monologuing? And then where did this come from? It just felt a little disjointed for me. Did y'all have that impression, or no? Am I overboard here?
Well, Lauren, I'll let you answer first.
I mean, I don't know. I just was kind of going with it at this point. So
Gotcha.
I think I didn't. Yeah, I think I was just along for the ride. I didn't really think about it one way or the other, if it belonged at that point or not.
Okay.
I just wasn't sure where the dialogue fit either. It was like literally just in a monologue. Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No. Well, so I totally understand where you're coming from, because I can see it, and this and the way the episode kind of ended, where, I don't know. Maybe I'm already used to it with Star Wars television, because it's not the first time it's happened. An episode ends and you're like, okay, that's it, kind of thing. But here's where I think it came from. One, they probably wanted to establish the villain some way up front. And if you think about where this goes from here on out, at least the second episode, the third episode feels like we're going to get a lot of Kelnaka, maybe the flashback sequence at that point. I don't know. So where do you slot that in, right? It feels like if they want to introduce it, it's going to have to be here. The other thing, and I'm making this completely up, but when she's walking on that beach, that rocky beach, I wonder if that is Olega, which is the opening planet, right? Olega is kind of on the shore. It's kind of up on that rocky hill kind of thing. I think maybe this is a way to kind of transition that, even though that's not necessarily what they did. If that is the same planet that she's on now, if May is on Olega and it ends on Olega, that bears more proof that Kamir is the master, right? Because he would have to be on that planet because we know Kamir's takes over the potion shop, whatever it is, apothecary later on. So I get what you're saying. It does feel a little bit awkward. I was so caught up, I think, in just hearing the voice. And while we're on the topic of who the master is and more evidence it being Kamir, although I don't think it is, I think there's misdirection here, and I think it's intentional misdirection. You pointed this out early on when we first heard the voice. You said it sounded like Manny Jacinto, right?
Yeah.
And the more you listen to it, it does sound like a modulated version of Manny's voice. Even just the tone, the inflection, everything about it sounds very similar to him doing it. But I'll read the quote here in just a second. But any thoughts about, I guess, any of that? Does that make you feel any better? Or do you feel like, yeah, it's still just kind of weird?
Well, I still think it's out of place, but no, I got to the same place you did though. So I'm glad you kind of brought it up, because I think at the end of the day, they were just ripping Band-Aids off everything left and right for episode 1 and getting it out there in the open, getting the twins thing or the sisters, all of that stuff just out in the open. So it made sense for us to go ahead and do this too and establish the dialogue was maybe a little clunky for me, but I think just establishing an acolyte and what the Jedi would be like, how do you actually harm a Jedi, or what is it that you can actually do? It explained the weapons thing a little bit, I guess. But it established some of that too. And I'm with you. I think this was a Lega, and I think this just helped to establish this next planet, because this is our 3rd planet, I think, on this series already. So I think it was all established right there too. So I kind of landed in the same place as you, I think, overall.
Leftero's comic says, I'm so starved for any Sith action, I'll take it. I think we were kind of all there as well.
I think we're all in the same boat, right?
And look at One Up, man, just keeping it going here. Poison Keeper. So we've got the Noodle Keeper and now the Poison Keeper in this series. So we'll have to keep rolling with that one. So keep your lights on for that. The quote is, the Jedi live in a dream they believe everyone shares. If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail. And I think this is what he's saying. This is the dream, right? That they live in. That if you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail. Steel or laser are no threat to them. But an acolyte kills without a weapon. An acolyte kills the dream. So I think it speaks to kind of the, I guess the.
What villain does this sound like, Lauren, in the High Republic?
Markion Rowe.
There's a lot.
Is that the correct answer?
There's a lot of consistency with Markion's philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. Killing the dream, hating the Jedi just to hate the Jedi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd throw Palpatine in there. There's other, I guess, Sith lords and legends that probably had this kind of same concept or mantra, motto, slogan, whatever it is. But yeah, I think you're right. It does kind of explain that, there's something almost symbolic about killing a Jedi unarmed to kind of prove this point exactly here, right? If this is part of their code or whatever it is, their, I guess, dogma, then I can see where that is kind of a step that needs to take place. But
that's a good point, though, with like Palpatine, because I think this is also stepping towards that direction, too, of all of the stuff he was doing in the background to belittle the Jedi, lose confidence in the Jedi. How do you have to bring them down to the normal people level so they don't feel so special.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe this is starting to set some of the stage for that too, which is kind of an interesting way of doing that.
And that goes back to the question, and we're not going to answer it tonight or even here, but it goes back to that question I keep nagging at. Is like, why are they doing it now? There just so much needs to go into play and happen before they're going to be able to kind of take over. And it doesn't feel like this master or May or anybody else is in a position to do that, right? We again don't need to answer it now, but it is curious that that this is what they've decided to do, and I would imagine over the course of the next 6 episodes we'll learn more about that.
So Sheriff had a good comment there. Maybe we'll just do a quick poll. So are we all in agreement that the Sith we saw is the apprentice and not the master, even though we're calling this the master? So what are y'all's kind of initial just raw impressions, master or apprentice, that we're seeing on screen?
I've been on the apprentice board or bandwagon since, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago. Like I think just narratively it would be more suspenseful and a bigger payoff if we get to learn the master at the very end of this series and carry that into season 2. I love I would love the misdirection to continue, for us to continue to think that this is the master, and there's more signs of them alluding to that this truly is the master, and then they pull a big 180 on us, and we really get the big bad reveal later on. So
and the master's Palpatine the whole time.
Oh, stop! As a baby, with a pacifier in his mouth. There's no way he's even around.
That would suck.
Yeah.
I don't think they would do that to us again.
But what do you guys think, Jonesy, master or apprentice?
Oh, I'm on record saying the apprentice. I think from the final hype and everything else. What about you, Lauren?
I think probably apprentice. I could see it going either way. But yeah, I agree about there being a bigger reveal coming later on.
Yeah.
I think it gives the show more flexibility to keep the master secret, or the master, I don't want to say in the dark, but off screen, off in the side, not really part of this. And Leslie Headland seems to be framing this up that it's very much the apprentice looking for the next generation so they can overthrow the master a little bit. Seems to be heading that way, but I'm with you guys. I think it just makes sense to keep the master something special, and that gives us a lot more flexibility around who is the actual Sith Lord during this era, and we might not even have to necessarily answer it and break canon or change canon or confirm canon. I think in some ways it would probably just a little bit of a troll effort, but I think it would actually be a little bit funny in the same way. Yeah.
All right, let's move into the second episode. I know we're almost in 2 hours, but this one should go a little bit faster because I think we've spent a lot of time kind of talking about the characters and some of the development. We're past a lot of that. But we open up in Olega. This is the local Jedi temple. The scene prior to this, you can see, or maybe it was, the scene prior to this, we haven't talked about May's ship, which I think we'll talk about more later in probably episode 3 or episode 4. But you can see it kind of parked there just on the outskirts of Olega. It's a very interesting design. Nonetheless, she pays another child. I don't know what she's got going on here with paying people, but she pays this small child to, get the security droid to come out. She breaks into the Jedi temple. There's some feedback about how easy it was. She's a Sith assassin, and just kind of give her the benefit of the doubt. Like, why get caught up around that either?
It's maybe more that she was able to walk around somewhat freely. Maybe is the one thing. I think breaking in the way they did, that was just pretty clever, actually. So
yeah, where I would poke holes in that is in the scenes that we see of the Jedi temple, there are just people walking around freely, and they don't look like Jedi people. So we don't know what they're doing there. It's not all Jedi. They could have visitors. They could be on a field trip, and this is where they went and took the kids or something. I don't know.
These are the librarians. Yeah.
Right. We have no idea. Like, it's Right. All right. Anyways, she makes her way over to Master Torben. And she goes through the whole mantra again. Master Torben, we have unfinished business. She said the same thing to Adara. She said we had unfinished business. Attack me with all your strength. I still don't know what to think about all your strength. Again, I don't know if that's just part of the ritual. They'll probably explain that at some point here. But she can't get through this barrier, and we've already talked. We've mentioned it, but I find it interesting that Torben he's taken the Barash vow. I don't know what the Force bubble thing is. That seems like a new concept. It's not new to Legends. That they could create a force barrier of such, but to pair that with the Barash vow is a very interesting take. Like, we haven't seen anybody else take the Barash vow and they're, surrounded by a bubble of sorts. So I guess, Jonesy, I'll start with you. Any thoughts around that?
First of all, absolutely love that this is finally in live action canon. This goes back to 2017, the Darth Vader comic. Of course, we first got it. And then we get the backstory in the High Republic comics with
the Blade.
Yeah, with the Blade series, right, which highly recommended, of course, Lauren, and y'all did a great job covering some of that material too. But I'm really happy to see it on screen. I like the idea of a force bubble, because if you're going to be in this kind of deep meditated state, especially if he's been doing this for years, you need something to kind of protect you in some kind of way. Actually, and Steph pointed this out to me. I didn't notice it right away. When May is punching the bubble, you can actually see the shape of her hand and her fist like flattens against it. Like if you were to do it against a window, which I thought was just a really cool effect and attention to detail, right? But the reasoning behind the Barash vow is a little unclear at this point. I think it's very unclear at this point, that we could probably speculate on, but I think it's very unclear about what the actual reasons for it are. But I like the idea that this is coming into like pure canon, that there's something that's happened so traumatically to a Jedi and I think this is really important in the High Republic era, is that when the Jedi really feel like they screwed up royally, that's when they enter this of like, I need to go back into deep contemplation and complete inward looking, because I have misinterpreted the Force in its most fundamental ways and screwed up. And I need to take this time to go do it. Now, usually we see them in seclusion, though, which is a little bit interesting. He's doing it in the temple. But again, that he's doing it in the temple, I don't really have a problem with. I think that actually makes sense in some ways, too, especially if there's something special, or if there's maybe some unique way, or again, you're a little more protected in that way, I think, too, depending on what was going on. And it seems like he's needed medical attention at some point. So maybe there's something to that, but that's all just me making stuff up.
Yeah. So just quickly, the context around the Barash vow, because I know this is one of the elements that's been introduced into Star Wars. And unless you've been reading the comics or reading the High Republic, you may be scratching your head going like, what is this kind of thing? And it's not necessarily crucial to understand. It doesn't really make or break what's happening. Just know that they're, meditating and there's some kind of bubble around him. But the context of the Barash vow was there was a Jedi who was with her brother, somebody by the name of the Blade. They went to a planet. There was two families that were feuding, and this Barash is her name. She made a decision based purely on emotion, right? There was a woman that was pregnant, and she was kind of playing this up as kind of like, oh, poor me, they're attacking me, they want my baby kind of thing. And so she bought into that emotionally and went to help her when really she should have helped the other side. And when that happened, she felt like, I listened to my heart, I listened to my emotions, even though the Force was screaming at me to make this other decision. And so therefore, I'm going to stay part of the Order. Very clear on that, right? They don't leave the Jedi Order,
Right.
but they do take a break of silence, if you will. They go kind of into exile, and they just try to reconnect with the Force, right? And that could take days, it could take weeks, however long it takes for them to reconnect. I don't know that necessarily. It almost feels like Torben is doing this for the purpose of like shame and guilt more than maybe reconnecting with the Force. I mean, there's probably some aspect of that. I'm not saying there isn't, but it does feel, based on the fact that he kills himself, given the opportunity, it seems like he just can't deal with it. And the only thing he knows to do is to really just kind of go out of sight, out of mind, connect with the Force, and just stay there and hope for better days ahead, kind of thing. So, yeah. I don't know, Lauren, do you want to add anything to that, or either one of you at this point?
I mean, I was excited that the Barash vow was included. Just that alone had me excited. And yeah, I think it says a lot about whatever went down on that planet for him to actually take the Barash vow for 10 years and kind of live it out the way that he was doing. I mean, it really had me being like, what in the world happened? But I do feel like with the Barash vow, it kind of seems like each Jedi interprets how exactly they're going to be taking that vow in sort of their own way. It doesn't really seem like there's one set way to do it.
It's true.
So to me, it kind of makes sense that, maybe going to this temple and meditating in this way, maybe that's what made sense to him at the time.
Yeah. Jonesy, what do you make of I mean, I'm sure we're going to find out, but that guy looks pretty beat up. Torben's face is scarred. His eye is kind of crazy. I don't even know what's going on there. He almost looks like he's got skier's eye or something, but he looks very different than what we're going to see here in the flashbacks.
Yeah, and we know that we got a flashback sequence with Kalnaka fighting, and it seems like he's probably fighting Torben in that regard. So clearly something with the Coven, right? All of this is still revolving around May and Osha. So there's something really tense that's going on. And again, we know that Torben is overtaken by this magics or whatever it is. So what is it that actually happens? Is he forced to do something that he didn't have control over, or did he believe in something and give himself over? These are the questions that we really need to have answered before we can really feel like we've got a great idea of why does he feel so strongly? Because again, to take his life is really, really, really uncommon. I'm trying to think if we've ever had a Jedi take their own life.
I
None,
don't
no
know
major
that we
ones
have.
I could think of, right?
I don't even know that we have. I'm even thinking in Legends, like I mean, there were so many characters in Legends, but I can't think of one that comes to mind anyways. We'll have to do
That
some
was the
research on that.
truly shocking part of this, right? And we had
Yeah.
speculated, like, what is the vial around her neck when we saw,
Yep.
in the teasers and the trailers and stuff. And I did not see this one coming where he would actually take his own life, because we just never think a Jedi is capable of that amount of self. I don't know what the right word is, just self-loathing, I guess, to where you feel like you can't live with yourself, and if you get anything remotely close to absolution, you feel like that's as good as I can get. I'm out, and it's not become one with the Force. It's just, I want to be released from this pain effectively.
Yeah,
So-
Gary just chimed in on that too. Obi-Wan death by Vader. Yeah, I think definitely he takes his. Well, you could argue that he
was a
wasn't taking his life.
That was a sacrifice. I think maybe a little different playing field, but yeah, point taken.
Yeah,
though.
yeah. No, I get it.
But that's the part that's really got me scratching my noodle, though, is like, how do I interpret this from Torben? But again, we need that context, which I'm hoping we'll get here in the next couple of episodes. With Kalnaka coming, I'm hoping maybe this is coming soon, right?
Mhm.
Because now we've got Torben introduced and he's gone. Now we're going straight to Kalnaka. It's hard to believe this is episode 3. We're already pretty much introducing everybody, it feels like, too, right? So this is where things will be interesting to see how many perspectives we start to see and where the shift starts to happen.
Lauren, I know we jumped ahead, but do you have any theories, anything stirring around in your head as far as why he takes his life later down the road here?
I mean, to me, it seems like the guilt. And I mean, he would rather just remove himself from the situation than confess to the council, which is the other option that she gives him.
Yeah, great point there too.
So guilt isn't even the right word. It's really shame.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's the only thing that would prevent him from being like, I'm not telling the council. I'm just gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
That's a great distinction. Guilt is kind of how you feel. Shame is how you interpret yourself of how you are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a
Yeah.
very distinct. That's really, really appropriate there.
All right. Well, she punches, kicks, can't get through. She escapes. Jedi come in because they hear a noise, and she gets away. We go back to the transport ship. This is Osha waking up again. And she helps Jackie really quick. There's a nice little moment there where she kind of shows her prowess around, knows her way around the ship, if you will. Sol walks in, and Yord says that Osha should be held captive. So he's still of the belief that, like, hey, we shouldn't be allowing this person to be running around just kind of willy-nilly without any cuffs on or anything like that. And then Yord says May would not have the training to defeat a Jedi Master. I mean, that's kind of the confidence in Yord, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But he does caution that they could be working together. He's not off base. Like, most of what he says is like absolutely reasonable and certainly by the book, but he's just kind of doesn't have that softer touch of the Force, if you will, that Sol has. And we clearly see examples of that. Sol even goes so far as to tell him, look, don't let your fear affect your judgment. The fact that they talked about fear, knowing the High Republic, is interesting, and they didn't dwell on it, but I hope that does come around more here in a little bit.
That's probably why Yord is so by the book, is because of fear, and he's more by the book than he is compassionate, which Sol is the opposite of that.
Yes.
So
Definitely can see that.
yeah.
Sol calls Vern, and we get just kind of more confirmation. This is where they confirm that she does have a twin sister. This is where Vern says that she wasn't aware of that. They presume that she died 16 years ago. She tells them that there's been another incident in Oleg, and she sends Vern out there. Vern sends Sol and the team to go investigate. Who's Yord's again against the idea, but he does eventually just kind of fall in line. All right, we get our first introduction to Kamir at this point at the apothecary on Oleg. He's passed out drunk, for the night before, waiting for May to come back, and she comes in, May comes in, and they're kind of having this casual conversation about, hey, how'd it go last night? Or, kind of thing. It was really weird, very odd. But I do like that the relationship that they have. I'm not saying it's not abnormal, but it was just shocking. I thought it would be more like, I don't know what I was thinking, but it seemed very casual, which I oddly enjoyed. But he very casually, again, says, for Torben, you just got to find his weakness, kind of thing. And he's like, very nonchalant about it. Like unassuming about it. Like, yeah, I just find this. And while he's, mixing up this deadly cocktail of a poison that's going to kill him, they talked about bunta as being kind of this plant or whatever, this leaf that grows native to what planet are they from? I forget now. But yeah, all that is part of what he's doing there. And then he does mention that he knows about Kelnaka, the sleeping monk, right? So Kamir's very plugged into all of this. And I guess maybe let's just spend just quickly a couple moments here talking about all of the telltale signs, because we're going to get to them at some point, but let's just kind of lump them together now. There are a lot of telltale signs that would lead one to believe that Kamir is actually the master. And I'm using air quotes here because I think we all agree that this probably is just the acolyte or somebody that's vying to become the new master, looking for their new apprentice kind of thing. But everything from the voice modulation that we talked about, the fact that, you could argue that they're on Oleg here at the very end of episode 1, which transitions nicely into this episode here, because Kamir would have to be there. You almost had a Palpatine moment a little bit later when he's kind of like, oh, no, you poor Jedi, or you Jedi, you're scary. Don't do your magic stuff to me. I'm so helpless and helpless kind of thing. That seemed kind of on the nose, almost a little over the top in some ways. And then one of the ones that has really stood out to me is much later on, after May has escaped and she comes back looking for Kamir, she tries to kill him. And he very deftly dodges all of the attacks without even any kind of hesitation, which you're thinking, okay, guy has got a lot more depth to him than I suspected. You could argue about the death potion that he's creating. Like, how does one just know how to concoct something like that? That seems a little bit out of character, maybe out of place for him. And then there's one last moment, and Jonesy, I'll go to you first on this one, but there's one last moment when he's talking to Osha, when Osha walks in, and he's being really lighthearted and kind of like, hi. It's very kind of, that. And then it turns into, you look a lot like her. Like, his voice changes almost.
He got
There's almost
creepy real fast.
Real creepy when he does that, right? To be for Manny Jacinto to really kind of flip that switch was pretty eerie. So again, a lot of evidence building up against Khmer as being the master, but I don't know. I still feel like they're doing that intentionally for a misdirection a little bit later.
I mean, I mean, there's a lot of things that are growing. I mean, he off's an apothecary. They seem to be nomadic in some ways. They have to keep on the move. He seems to be orchestrating the deaths and guiding along the way. So it does seem to be more of a tutorship rather than a partnership, I think, in that way. So,
Mhm.
like I said, there's a lot of signs that suggest that Khmer is the one that he's testing her in plain sight of sorts, which I think would also be very appropriate and very Sith-like in that way to mingle amongst the commoners while you also have this. You've got very much the Palpatine effect, right? Of trying to you have a public presence because no one's going to suspect the one that you can see, right? And why would they be that person? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of things contributing to it. There were the couple of moments you pointed out, though. I think the one that really flagged it for me, I think avoiding the kill strikes and stuff from May was definitely one of them. But it was definitely that moment when he recognizes OSHA. Like, how did he know? And just the way that he tilted his head and the voice, the inflection of the voice changes a little bit. You get that very Sithy creepiness starting to come through. It was very well performed, actually. I really enjoyed it. But those were the type of moments I'm like, okay, we know that Sith have dabbled in the apothecary. We know that they do different all sorts of different concoctions and other magics and things like that. So why would he know these things? Why would she just ask for it and he'd just be like, yeah, sure, let me whip you up something, And clearly they've worked with each other for a while, but this is a character. I mean, when you look at who else is the candidates at this point, if we've seen them already, he's kind of the only candidate right now, right?
True. Yeah. That's
We
fair.
don't have a better one, so it's either somebody else or it's him based on what we see in this moment, based on the evidence that we have, right? So, but
Yeah.
again, we're a quarter of the way through here. We still got a long way to go, but I those were the couple moments. It was really that OSHA moment though that I kind of zero in on in some ways.
Yeah. What did you think about the Sith code reference, Lauren? And anything else you want to add about Manny Jacinto's performance or Khmer as being the prime suspect?
Well, I really liked Manny Jacinto's performance, but I gotta say I am hoping that it's not Khmer because I just feel like it's too soon. It's not anything I have against Khmer. I just feel like if it's just been Khmer the whole time, then it's kind of like, oh, it was just you. Okay. I
Hmm.
don't know. I'm hoping for like a kind of a more like whoa reveal. And to me, that doesn't really feel like a whoa.
Because it's too obvious at this point. Is that what you're saying?
Too obvious and also like, oh, he's right there. He's been right there this whole
Yeah,
time.
which is a Palpatine, right? It's the hiding in plain sight kind of thing, which I get
Maybe
it
it feels a
worked,
little
but
been there, done that for me.
yeah,
Maybe
I get
that's
you.
really what my issue is. And I guess I'm just hoping for kind of a more sort of like mystical figure, which maybe he does have that mystical side to him. And obviously, we're not going to see that when he's like living his double life type of thing. So
Hmm.
I could be proven wrong, but right now I'm kind of like, I kind of hope it's something that's a little bit more of a surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, he does also talk about putting Corbin at peace, right? I guess he understands that there's some kind of conflict that's happening with Corbin, and that May's responsibility is to give him absolution, which would be death. That's another interesting aspect of all this that I'm sure we'll get from flashback scenes or whatever. But the last part of that scene is, he says they've got a secret, and this again could just be more subterfuge or misdirection. But he says, May says it wouldn't be bode well for either of us if you told him about this, right? So I guess May is worried that, well, I don't know how to interpret this. Like, I guess my initial take was she's worried that if the master finds out that they used a poison to kill him, that wouldn't bode well for them. I don't know. Jonesy, how did you take that scene or that comment there at the very end?
Yeah, I think it goes back to losing faith from the master's perspective of that they're not even trying to do it without weapons. They were given a command, they were given an order. You need to do this without weapons, but here she is asking for it in advance. Or
Yeah.
I guess she's already tried once and she couldn't get through. But again, it's more the counsel that matters the most, right? It's the advice and the perspective that she's gaining is what the difference is. Now, clearly, this is the thing that she convinces the Jedi to do it to himself, but which is, I think, an interesting. It's a really cool way of doing it, actually. Of I think a very Sith-like thing. So I think that's actually kind of creative, but it's still a weapon. But again, keeping that from the master because we don't want the master to know I'm already creating. I failed once already, basically
Yep.
with Endara. Now I kind of failed again already with Torben.
Running
And
out of
now
Jedi here.
Right. And now with Torben, I've got to go back and try again, and I'm going to fail because I'm going to use a weapon.
Mm.
So, I mean, those things are just not adding up for her, and she wants to protect that, her own
Reputation or
she doesn't want to
chances.
lose it. And at what point does the master say, "All right, y'all are out next"? Who's and start moving on, right? Because the Sith are known for being super patient.
Yeah.
Based on the monologue, though, I was kind of thinking like to me, it seemed like the master does know that she's probably not going to get it on the first time. I don't know if
because
that
it's
was.
Kamir. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's here on first hand.
Yeah.
Oh
He's
my
like, it's
gosh.
fine. I already know. You're good.
Well, I meant like he's understanding of the fact that she's not going to get it. I think he is expecting her to get it by the fourth one, and if she doesn't get it by the fourth one, then that's when you failed. But I don't know if she would be in trouble for using the poison because she still killed 2 Jedi, which I mean that's something, right? So I don't know. I feel like as long as she kills one of them without a weapon by the end of the 4, then maybe she'll have passed the test. But the way I interpreted it is she's just kind of ready to just go ahead and pass the test. She doesn't want to have to wait until she gets to the last one to pull it off.
Mm.
So let me ask y'all a question. Do you think if she were to use the Force and like Force choke, do you think that would be considered a weapon in this case?
I don't think so.
I would say I don't know. There's something.
How else are you going to kill them without using something to kill them with?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. It's interesting that the way they've kind of, because she doesn't go to her daggers immediately,
right.
right? So how she would kill them otherwise, it's either going to be some kind of chokehold, or like you said, it's the use of the Force, which maybe feels like it's fair game if they could actually pull that off. But I mean,
I was wondering if maybe that was the point, that
Yeah.
they have to figure it out and give themselves over fully to the dark side and
to the
embrace
rage.
that. And that's the only way to truly kill the Jedi, is to give in to that aspect.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that's probably more in line there. But I do feel like the Last Jedi, that pun intended, the last one on the list, it feels like it's going to be Kilnaka will be the third one that probably dies, if he dies, and then they'll probably leave Soul for a very dramatic kind of scenario with her, and a rematch, if you will, between her and May, or May and Soul at that point.
You mean Soul and Osha?
Or whoever. No, Soul and Osha. Okay, so we're back on we're back on the transport ship here. They're heading to Oleg, and we get a really cool scene here between Master Soul and Osha. Very nice. I love they make that little comment about the the icebreaker about the tattoo. She thinks he's talking about the pip droid. And we also learned that Osha says that they both saw May die. So again, we're getting her perspective now here.
Right.
Soul admits that he did want to try to save both of them. It sounds like he had to make a choice. And maybe, he was able to save one, but not the other. Maybe it's one of these kind of, no good choice scenarios that we saw, kind of like in episode 1. But Osha says that it wasn't Soul's fault. And I think they've had this conversation many times, right? As many times as maybe she tried to talk him out of, hey, it wasn't your fault. He was trying to talk her out of, letting go of the grief and letting go of the anger, and because of what had happened, kind of thing. There is also, Soul says he did make peace with it all. He says that he tried to reach out to Osha many times about this conversation. Of course, that never worked out, and that's why she was never able to accept her loss. And he says, perhaps I wasn't a very good teacher. And again, this is where we get back to more shades of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Even though it's not explicitly said, they're certainly kind of echoing some of those similar thoughts there. You guys have any thoughts around, I guess, this little conversation?
Well, I like it that he's able to admit where he's maybe not done everything that he originally set out to do. Like, that's one thing that I really like about Soul, is that he's not a perfect Jedi. I mean, you can see that he tells her not to grieve, but you can see that he's grieving some things himself. He's not perfect, but he has so much compassion that I feel like that kind of outshines that. But in the moments where they're having a real conversation about what went wrong and what happened, he is able to admit, like, maybe I fell short in some ways too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's very much like the lack of that empathy of like Obi-Wan and Anakin that we see, especially I think in the comic books for Obi-Wan and Anakin, when Anakin's very young and they're struggling and to really get on the same page. I think we see that with Soul. He's recognized that he's fallen short of that in the past by maybe not looking enough from her perspective. This goes back to episode 1 with the younglings of saying, he's Yeah, they were lucky to have him as a teacher, but he's lucky to have them teach him as well. And I think he's with time, you get that maturity and you get that perspective, and he's finally able to do saying, hey, it really takes both of us in order to find a path, and we could have done this better together rather than maybe me feeling like I've got to teach you how to get past this or just telling you to get over your grief, because we've seen Jedi do that too. You have to suppress that. That's attachment. That's bad. We don't want to talk about it. When really it's like, okay, no, how do we actually manage this and do something constructive with it so that we can truly feel like we can let it go rather than just telling him. And he kind of says this, just let it go. It's more of that emotional reaction to it rather than a more thoughtful, joint effort to go and try to do something productive with it.
Yeah. Sorry, there's two questions quickly here. Is an acolyte is an acolyte a Sith? Formally, no. But we don't know anything about we don't know where these guys are coming from. If they're descendants of the rule of two of Bane, then at some point, yes, they will be a Sith. But we don't know anything canonically about the formal process of how one becomes a Sith. Maybe that gets explored here. Maybe gets explored sometime in season 2. So I guess the question is maybe on that one. And then was Kylo Ren a Sith? No, that's been said. That's already been proven to not be the case officially, canonically for Star Wars. Okay, we go to the Jedi Temple. And these scenes kind of run back and forth, so I'm just kind of bunching them up here. We got Sol, Jackie, Yord, and Osha. They're being greeted by the temple people there. They mentioned that someone broke in. We get to see these two Jedi who don't feel. I know I've heard people again. We talked about this much earlier on in the episode, but I've seen a lot of people say these guys didn't even feel like Jedi. They didn't seem like Jedi. Well, again, welcome to the varying degrees of Jedi prowess and Jedi expertise. There are a lot of them, and this was well established in the High Republic, and we see even shades of that in the comic books and that sort of thing. It's just kind of the new norm. Not everybody gets to be Mace Windu. Not everyone is Anakin Skywalker. Some of these Jedi are just hanging out in the temple, and they get 3 meals a day, and the rescuing cats from trees and stuff. That's about as much as they do.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. Someone's got to fill the role, right? They've got all these temples
That's
out
probably
there.
the most important role, arguably.
Exactly. Saving pets is what they're good at. But anyways, they bring the kid out. The kid, obviously identifies Osha and is like, hey, yeah, she's the one that made me do it kind of thing. And then so they head into the temple. And this is where May has kind of this vision where she sees the child leave again, and she decides to go and venture off the path. Don't get hung up on whether or not how she beat them to the Torben's body. I mean, come on, you're again focusing on the wrong things if that's really what you're nitpicking at this point. But Yord follows her, and we learned this later on. I thought was this is part of his redemption, right? He's doing the right things. Like I thought that was really brilliant of him to have followed her around there. But while that's going on, May is making her second attempt, and this time she just talks to him. Do you remember Master Torben? I know why he took the Barash vow. He finally wakes up after she says that you can either, confess your crime to the Jedi Council or take his own life, which he makes a decision. He drinks the vial. She tells him to face the past, Master Torben. There's a lot going on here. His comment about "I've been waiting for you, May." That's the one I don't really know. Like I don't know why he would, much less why he took his life, right? But why would he say he was been waiting for her? Is this maybe during the course of how many 6 years, 10 years, however long he's been meditating now, or in the Barash vow? Did he have a Force vision where he saw her approach and saw this was how his life was going to end?
I imagine it's probably closer to 16 years now, right?
16 years, yeah, whatever it is. I mean,
yeah, and it kind of makes you suggest that. I mean, we know that he was a Padawan at that time, I believe. I don't think he was a knight. You kind of wonder if maybe he started the fires. I mean, there's a certain element of like, I think you brought this point up earlier. Do we actually know the truth? Do what we see, like Sol saying that May started the fire? Maybe it was Torben. Maybe there was something under the influence. Something else happened that will be a bit of a surprise as we go on. That would have needed this need for the purest form of absolution, and even that's still not good enough. You just got to go and take your own life. But there's clearly something here. There's a lot more depth to this moment than I was anticipating would be part of this character. I thought it would just, some things would play out. They would be a little bit softer. They would just be adding on. But this one seems like there's actually something really big here of what did you actually do, Torben, in your youth, and what have you covered up? And the confessing to the Jedi Council just adds on top of that. I don't know what it would be unless it's specifically around the tragedy that may have happened 16 years ago that, presumably killed May in that moment. Of course it didn't, but something along those lines. But I don't know. Lauren, your
His,
takes
yeah,
on
his,
that one?
well, I'll tee you up. His last words are, "Forgive me. We thought we were doing the right thing."
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is it confirmed yet how well these 4 Jedi actually knew this family before the fire? Or did the Jedi show up because of the fire? Do we know
Yeah.
that yet?
No, in my own head, at least right now, it sounds like they responded to what was going on. Or if that didn't happen, then there must have been some freak accident, because we see Kelnaka and Torben with the Jedi Coven. I think I remember seeing other Jedi there, like maybe Indira off to the side or Sol off to the side. Maybe something happened there and the fire started and it became, chaotic, and they decided to try to save everybody, and, hard decisions were made, kind of thing. But no, I don't think they haven't said anything just yet.
Because I was wondering if maybe Torben knew May somehow before the fire actually happened. If, I don't know, they were friends. I mean, who knows? I don't know what
Yeah.
that could look like. But I'm wondering if maybe he already knew her, and that's why there seemed to be such a personal investment in the fact that, like, him saying, "I've been waiting for you." I mean, that sounds like there's a personal connection there that maybe just exceeds, like, you were negligent with this fire. Like, it just sounds like there's more to it than that still needs to be uncovered.
Jonesy, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I kind of like that too. Of maybe they attacked when they normally wouldn't have. Again, there had to be some catalyst, though. I think that's the part that I don't have a really clear insight into. Is like, what is the catalyst for whatever this might have been? And there had to have been something there. And again, we know that Mother Anastasia probably seems a little provocative in some ways, and probably teasing them on, or not teasing them on, but antagonizing maybe the Jedi in some ways with her coven and the way that she kind of behaves and maybe presents the coven and herself. Of maybe they don't care about the Jedi, or they don't value them, or they think they're kind of a waste, or they're maybe a legacy of the open hand or whatever that might be in the past. But there's got to be something there that really triggers all of this stuff. And I'm actually more interested in that than I thought I would be at this point.
I think so what came to me when he said, "Forgive me, we thought we were doing the right thing." There is a theory out there. I forget what the scenario's got. It's got an official name that's called, I just call it killing baby Hitler, right? If you had baby Hitler right in front of you and you knew that he was going to grow up and do awful things, would you kill the baby, right? That's a very moral, ethical decision that you have to make. And this is posed out there, and it's used for science and education, all kinds of ways. But I wonder if we're in that same kind of scenario, right? You have two Swiss sisters, one light, one seething in the dark side, pure evil. And they have a vision that someday this child is going to bring about, hellfire, and people are going to die, mass suicides and mass killings and that sort of thing. And they were given that decision. Okay, do we let one live, and do we kill the other one, right? Do we set it? Do we cause the fire? Do we create a fire? Did the Jedi create a fire so it looks like an accident kind of thing, and allow that child to die, and so that never manifests and never happens? That could be a scenario where the Jedi did something really awful, but their intentions were good. And we've seen that many times where their intentions are better than, are good, but the execution was terrible. That could be a scenario where they're like having to decide between all of that kind of thing. What do you think about that?
Then it would be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, by trying to stop the prophecy, they actually made it come true.
Right. They didn't ensure the body was found, kind of thing.
Well, and
Jonesy,
if they
you like
hadn't
it, or-
tried to
oh, sorry.
kill her, would she have gone to the dark side? I don't know.
Yeah, or right, exactly. Because they tried to kill her, that is what brought her to the dark side at some point.
I don't really have anything to add to it. Yeah.
Oh, I just meant would
Sorry,
you-
did
would
I
you be
take
on
that
board
from
with
you?
it, Jonesy?
No,
Sorry.
yeah, no, you're right where I'd be. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's move on to he takes the vial potion, he kills himself. They find the vial afterwards. They obviously run up on Osha. She's sitting there holding the vial, and Yord is saying, "Look, I followed her. She's good. She didn't do this kind of thing." And then she smells it and realizes that it's made from bunta, a plant that's natural to their planet. The next plan is to kind of do the stakeout. They realize that, okay, she's got to come, they're going to stake out. They want to find out where other apothecaries are around in this area. They do a stakeout, and they realize that Kamir, one of the local Jedi, recognizes that that's not the person that runs the shop. That leads them I'm sorry, I'm getting my wires crossed here. They come up with the two plans, right? The two plans are presented now. You've got Yord's plan, which is to secure the perimeter. Jackie stays on lockout, and he will confront the imposter, stun him, and take him prisoner for questioning. This is where Jackie says that, no, I'm going to, the better plan is for have OSHA disguise as May, then record the conversation and get him to confess kind of thing. And of course, Soul leans into Jackie's. I don't know that either one was really awful or better than the other, quite honestly, but I like that Jackie won on this one. She got a one up there.
It makes sense.
Yeah. He's also saying that he does talk about, there's that line there where Yord says, giving a civilian a weapon violates 13 precepts of the, I don't know what he was going to say and finish there. But they introduced this concept of the stun blaster, which I don't remember the Jedi using in the High Republic, honestly. But whatever, it's fine. It's interesting. We get the whole scene in the apothecary. I think we pretty much talked about everything already in this scene. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add or anything we glossed over. I did love the lighter moment where, who is he? And he's like, I thought he was with you kind of thing. That was a nice little quip there from Kamir. Maybe more evidence that he's the Sith Master because they tend to be kind of funny people. But I don't know. What do you think?
What's funny about that line is the first time it didn't make me laugh, and then the second time it did. I don't know why.
Right.
It just hit better the second time.
Yeah.
What do you think about Soul basically saying, "Hey, if you cooperate, you'll just get off with a warning"? Like he helped kill somebody. Like, this goes back to what you're saying at the beginning of the show. I know, but this is what I wanted to come back to. I'm like, he's like, he clearly is involved. He clearly knew what he was doing. They've got it recorded.
Yeah.
And then they come back and say, well, if you tell us more, if you cooperate, then we'll let you off with a warning. Like, no, you helped kill somebody.
You aided and abetted a criminal. Yeah. In a murder.
Well, Vernestra did tell him to keep it quiet.
True. I think it just goes back to, like, I know people have been pretty critical of the Jedi for making this mistake, but I mean, this is what Luke was talking about. It's the arrogance of them, right? They think they've got it all figured out. There's no reason for them to think that there's, really powerful, nefarious people behind all of this. Yeah, maybe somebody is training Force users to do mean things, but it's not the Sith, not in their minds. And they know they established this at the very beginning with the crawl that there are other people out there using the Force, and they probably want to put a squelch on that as much as possible. But I think it just speaks to their arrogance. I think it was like, hey, we're the mighty police officers here, right? We're the we're the Jedis, and we're going to be magnanimous and allow you to just kind of go about your way and change your ways kind of thing without really thinking through the repercussions of letting somebody like that go. I mean, it seems foolhardy, but given the circumstances and where they are, currently, it probably is in character and in line with the Jedi's thinking in their ways. That's how I kind of wrote it off. But
that makes sense. I could see that.
Yeah. Okay. So they decide that they're going to, he mentions that, by the way, she's going to be back here a little bit later. He pretty much gives her up at that point, which is a very Sith kind of thing to do. If you think about it, another, check mark there or hash mark there.
Do you think he was willing to do that because there's something about OSHA that is like another plan developing in his head? Again,
maybe. I like that idea.
If there's more to Kamir than maybe we're, not led to believe, but led to believe.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if he saw a new opportunity with OSHA when he recognized her, if there was some other thing that triggered in his mind.
Yeah.
He's casting the net out again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's more people out there if we need them kind of thing. We get I have a bad feeling about this line from Yord, which was great to hear, great to see. He feels like they're, the guy's line, or it's a trap. Jackie tells him not to interfere, which he does, and makes the right decision there. But Soul needs to confront him on his own. This is what Jackie's telling Yord at that point. They kind of have, Soul and OSHA kind of have that final moment, where she wants to go and he's like, no, I have to do this on my own. She basically says, look, you're not my master anymore. I can do what I want kind of thing. Which I thought was a funny conversation. If you have any teenagers, that certainly comes up. And he tells her that this is grief, right? That it's destroying her life, that this is all the reasons why she left the order and she's still dealing with a lot of this stuff.
And he didn't realize how angry she still was.
Yeah.
Which was a great line.
Yeah. And we get the title of this episode, right, in this conversation where she's talking about, she says, I deserve justice. He says, you want revenge. Yeah. Which I thought was a really good opportunity there to kind of weave that in there, or at least talk about, the Jedi don't seek revenge. I'm no Jedi kind of thing from the Clone Wars season 2 kind of thing. But
it shows you how it can evolve, right? You can have the intent of justice, but quickly or you just take that extra step because you didn't realize truly what you wanted out of it until you're in the moment.
Yeah. It says, look what revenge has done to your sister. I don't know. There was a lot of thoughts that came to mind when that line was echoed. We've
It
seen
did
that.
kind of put her in her place, though. She had a sobering moment, at least. It was received, I think, in the way that he intended it to be
Yeah.
received by her.
He does make a comment that he could not have saved her. He didn't have a chance to save her when she was a child, and he wants to try now. So I don't know. It doesn't really, I don't know if that plays into my baby Hitler theory, but it certainly speaks to him wanting to redeem himself, still feeling guilty about what happened there. We get there's a quick moment there too where they're talking about update. You know, they get a confirmation that they're looking after for 4 Jedi from 16 years ago, and then he leaves with saying, "Have faith in May. Have faith, May. Have faith in me." Before he kind of walks away. So, either of you have thoughts on that before we get into the May fight? Okay, we'll move on to well, no, I just want to make sure I don't want to skip over anything. So May approaches the Jedi. They get confirmation that she's on her way. Jackie jumps into she plans to intercept, I guess, at this point. Saul calls out to her, and she throws a dagger at his feet, but not at him. Any thoughts around that?
I thought that she seemed really upset to see Saul. Like I feel like we saw more emotion from her to see him than we did for Torben or Indara.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know. I was just trying to think, why would that be? Because she didn't really, we don't know that she had a relationship with him.
Yeah, it was just something about the look in her eyes. I just felt like there was more of a reaction there. And yeah, she throws it at his feet. I mean, it could be something about, I mean, this is like a lot of speculation. It could be like whatever went down that she's getting revenge for. Maybe Saul was one that kind of got dragged into it. Maybe he wasn't one of the main. Thank you, Jonesy. Maybe he wasn't one of the main like instigators of whatever went down. Saul is also very easy to like. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know. To me, there seemed like a certain type of connection with Soul specifically.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. When there was a definite shift in the surprise to see Soul come around the corner and to have to engage with him. And I'm wondering if Osha has something to do with that too, that she was the chosen one, and that, gosh, sorry, I didn't mean to use that word.
Not capital C, not capital O, just chosen
Right.
one. Yeah.
She was the one who was found and taken in. And there's some sort of, maybe there's jealousy, or maybe there's envy, or maybe it's like that. Why it couldn't have been both of us? I was left to die. You were taken away, and you had this privileged life or this privileged opportunities and things like that, when she had to go and suffer. And she equates some of that to Soul, especially because there's a new layer. And again, the way that they were kind of going through the progression of who they were going to kill, it seemed like Soul was last.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so
Right.
I think, again, there's a little bit of a surprise, but I'm wondering if it has something to do with Osha and that relationship in particular that is striking her the wrong way.
That's the only, honestly, that's kind of, it's very loose right now, but there's something about the relationship with Osha that probably prevented her from killing him, at least then and there, or prevented it or spoke to her, or like, I don't know, maybe the light called out to her and she realized I didn't want to kill him in that moment, kind of thing. I don't know. It's very interesting that she didn't try to kill him from the get-go. She more tried to stop him.
She didn't say her corny line either, did she?
Which
No.
one?
The come attack me with all of your strength.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good point. I wonder if that's because she didn't approach them. Maybe there's something about, the semantics of it all, where she's got to approach them and rather than him calling out to her. Good
Maybe
call.
she's like, oh crap, I wasn't ready for Soul yet.
I didn't prep for this one.
Yeah,
think
like I was going after Kelnaka next.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know why you would take on a Wookiee versus a human, but all right.
Because Soul is the more emotionally complicated one to kill, in my opinion. I don't know. We'll
I
see
can
if
see
that
that.
ends up being true, but
Yeah. Great fight sequence. We won't get into all the moments. I love that he took the knives away from her. I really like that moment. And I know it was in the trailer, but just seeing it and
just
hearing it in
appears
Dolby.
behind her.
Yeah, that was so cool. I love that. And that's all Headland's direction. So big kudos to her. Because you would expect a Jedi to do stuff like that, right? To be able to, especially somebody like Soul. We don't know we know now. But yeah, the way he did that. And then, of course, he freezes her before she hits the ground after he flips her over and probes into her mind. We get a reveal that she doesn't even know who the master is. He does say his, so I think it's a male figure, at least for now. But it is interesting that he's gone to great lengths to keep that hidden from May and possibly Kamir as well. Although, again, we've already talked about Kamir possibly being the master himself. He's also says, even after all this time, your thoughts go towards your sister, which reminded me of the Darth Vader line, Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader line from Return of the Jedi. But May also is shocked to find out that she thought Osha was dead.
Yeah.
So she thinks that Soul's lying about her being alive. This is that big argument discussion they're having there. She tries to throw a dagger at Soul, and this is where Yord does what he wasn't supposed to do, which is interfere. But I don't know that it would have hit Soul either way. I think he would have probably done something to stop it. But nonetheless, he was, he got to be the hero, which is what he was wanting to do, right? Because he put himself in that position of like, I should be the one that goes and arrests her. He jumps down. They kind of force pushes her off pretty aggressively. Jackie arrives and she's kind of cornered, right? She's a cornered animal at this point, not really sure what to do. And she does this kind of big Ninja Gaiden force thing with all the dust in the air. Very, very cool. And gets away. She then hijacks his speeder. And this is where I want your thoughts on this. So they have the confrontation, right? Osha walks up to her, sees her trying to get away in an air speeder. She pulls out her weapon. And you can see the anger on her face, which I forgot to mention this. I do wonder if there's kind of like survivor's guilt going on here, if there's some level of that, because, she throughout this whole time thought she was alive and May was dead. That might be part of it. But I think the big question I have is, did she intentionally not shoot May? It looks like she had it. And if you look at her arm, it kind of moves to the right just a little bit before she pulls the trigger. And then as it's driving away, she really misses. I mean, this is like the side of a barn that she could have hit and didn't hit that. And we get that final shot with both, Master Soul and Yord walking up to her very cautiously, like, wait a second, what did you just do right there? We saw that kind of thing, you had an opportunity, you didn't do it kind of thing. So I don't know, Lauren, did you think that was intentional that she missed? And then I guess anything on the relationship between her and May, because it felt like in that moment, their defenses went down. Like it was I hate to call it a frozen moment, but there were the sisters suddenly in love with each other once again, like they had been reunited for the first time again.
I didn't think it was intentional that she missed, because to me, I'm thinking, okay, if my sister's going around killing people, she's obviously in a really bad way. So I need to stun her and bring her with me and help her. That's kind of like my thought. So to me, it seems like Osha would have, because it was a stun gun. I don't think it would have actually hurt May if she hit her. So to me, it seemed like it was an accidental miss, because it seemed like Osha would be concerned about trying to talk to May and trying to help May out of whatever situation she's got herself in.
Yeah. Jonesy, what about you? I saw you nodding, so I think you're in the camp of it was intentional.
I think it was intentional, yeah. And I think as soon as she called her Oshi, I was like, oh no, all right. There's no way they're bringing her in. She's gonna let her go. I mean, it's when you use the pet names, the nicknames,
the family names,
it goes straight. Yeah, the family names, it goes straight to the heart, right? And you could tell that all of this doubt came out about, like, what do I not know? What's going on here? And I think Soul's disappointment and the look that he gives her afterwards is where I feel like a little more affirmed in that way too, that you had the shot and you totally did that on purpose. Like you just botched it on purpose. You pulled it. So I think to me, it felt like it was pretty intentional. I think it was that moment where she used the pet name, the nickname, and they just had that moment where they locked in of like, okay, there's something else here. I can't do this to my sister. I don't agree with what she's doing. There's got to be a reason why she's doing this. And I think this is where we see a slight turn for Osha too, that there's maybe a hint of a little darker side maybe coming out, or this anger or these confusion is coming up and really muddling with her sense of right and wrong and morality, maybe of what she wants to do with regard to family versus what's the right thing to do for the Jedi.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I do wonder if there's part of the reason why because the question now, the question that's begged here is, why did she allow her to leave? I think there's probably, she's waiting. She wants to give her a fair opportunity to kind of prove herself innocent. I think there may be some sense of on Osha's part that this was not her fault. as much as it was never Osha's fault as well. Like they're both victims here. And
I think that's kind of where I was going, is that
yeah,
doubt. Like, is there that little hint of doubt that there's something she doesn't know that she wants to give her the benefit of the doubt on?
yeah, it's similar to like Master Soul saying, "I know Osha, right? And I know she didn't do this." I think Osha's looking at May and going, "I know her, right? We have this bond, and I know the kind of character she is, and this is not, there's something else pushing her to do this, and she's still innocent, and there's still good in her. I can feel it." Not to quote Star Wars again, right? But I can feel it, kind of thing. And she's given her the opportunity to get away because Osha wants to know more. There's still more that needs to be investigated to get to the truth of all of this. And so having her being taken in by the Jedi is really not the way to go, because once the Jedi get a hold of her, they're going to do what Vern did. They're going to put her down, unfortunately, or make her an example, if you will.
Right.
And that's not going to bode well, right? So she's going to give her sister every opportunity to do it. Now, I think that does break the confidence in Soul. So we'll see how that relationship continues to develop. And certainly with Yord, who was already on the fence and had just barely kind of maybe came over to the side of Osha. I don't think this did anything for her relationship with him too. So I think they're going to keep an eye, a much more watchful eye on her going forward in the episodes. Okay, let's wrap this up with Vernestra's orders, right? They call her, Soul calls up Vernestra and she says, "Look, you need to get back over here. I put a small council together. This no longer is about, oh, your Padawan going rogue. This is, now we've got a master involved. There's something else going on here," kind of thing. I don't think they're still thinking Sith, honestly, at this point. I don't think they're thinking Rule of Two and Bane and all that stuff. But I do think they are thinking, okay, there's somebody out there that's recklessly using the Force, and we want to put a damper on this, and we need to get more counsel from people, bring it to a committee, which is a very, again, the Phantom Menace Jedi kind of thing to do, not necessarily in line with what's going on here in during the phases of the High Republic. She even says, "We don't make decisions like this without meaningful discussion, Soul. We will see you soon." And she like cuts it off, over and out kind of thing.
Hooray, bureaucracy.
Right, yeah, welcome to corporate America. The meeting before the meeting kind of thing. And Soul, like the entire time, is like, "Look, we don't have time to talk. We got to get on this. They're going to go kill Kanaka next." And then we cut to the scene with Kanaka, which is very short. I mean, we just learned that he's on this crash planet of Kofar. These two wanderers come up and they're speaking Huttese the entire time. I didn't get a chance to even understand or translate whatever the sign was. I'm sure it said "get off my lawn" or something to that effect. But the fact that he's been living in wherever on Kofar on this crash ship, which I think is probably a Jedi ship, we'll probably get the context and the backstory on all of that here a little bit later. He is completely naked. I just want to call that out. So naked.
Thank you.
And takes the Force, takes the blaster away from that guy, breaks it in half, runs in there, and I don't know, has a TV dinner or whatever he does at this point. I think he's under the Barrage vow as well. He's just like, kind of to Lauren's point earlier, it's probably just a different take on it. He seems more of kind of like, I've exiled myself, more of a Luke Skywalker on Octu kind of thing. But yeah, we'll see where this goes. And I'm interested to see whether or not they if they disobey orders. Do they go back to Coruscant? All right. Do they say, "You know what? We're not doing this. We're going to follow, every Jedi walks their own path," to coin a phrase from the High Republic. Do they decide that the Force is calling us to Kofar and they're going to go there and they get in trouble? Because I think, given the landscape of where we are with Kofar and kind of what they've shown there, it looks like that is the same backdrop that we saw when the Jedi confront this master later down the road. But I know that's a lot there to kind of wrap things up. But Jonesy, I'll start with you. Any thoughts around all that there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think this is the planet that we see the final confrontation that we get, or at least the exciting confrontation with whoever the lightsaber wielding maniac is. But yeah, I think this is gonna be interesting to see if they. I'm with you. I don't know if they're going to. It doesn't feel like they would reject orders or go against orders and disobey. The Soul seems like he is willing to defer to Vernestra Rowe as the senior council member or whatever it might be, and do as he's told. He's voiced his displeasure, but he was overridden, and so they will go do this. So I think Kanaka might be on his own, but we know for a fact that they bring a contingency out there, though, at one point, because we see them walking along the cliff, and they overlook the cliff and down. It looks like to where where Kanaka's area is. So we know where they're going to go back out there, because clearly we've seen it, but it's a matter of when, and is Kanaka still there? Do they beat the others out there or not, or what that might be? But I'm really curious to see how they go about doing this. It doesn't make sense to go back to Coruscant if you know where they're going. I'm with Soul on this one. That just doesn't compute. That's like, we are going to lose the trail, and then we have a member that's in danger and they don't know what's coming. So why would we leave them to their own fate like that? That just doesn't feel right. So
And they've already killed 2 Jedi, so it's, they got the chops to do it. So
Yeah, I mean-
why risk it?
yeah, we've seen it happen, right? It's
Yeah.
scary and it's happening, but now you're gonna leave someone out on their own and they have no clue what's going on. Do you even have a way of communicating with them? We don't know the answers to these questions, but I don't know. It kind of makes me think maybe they'll disobey orders, but based on what we've seen, it seems unlikely they would. But to me, they should.
What
I
about
think
you,
they
Lauren? What do you
will.
think they're going to go to Coruscant?
I think they're going to disobey orders because I think that he's going to try to obey orders. And I think the more he thinks about it, he's going to be like, this really isn't right. And after what I just witnessed, like, we need to go take care of this. And I think it might take him a few minutes to come to the conclusion, but I think they're going to go try to help Kelnako.
I think so too. I don't know that they'll go back to Coruscant. I even wonder like if it's going to be Jeki, right? The young innocent Padawan suddenly speaks up and makes everybody realize like this isn't the right thing to do. I mean, it feels out of character given she seems to be like a permission to speak kind of person, or maybe maybe we get a 180 from Yord of all people who's like, hey, this isn't the right thing to do, kind of thing, right? If we're following by the book, we're hot on the trail. To your point, it feels like that's probably going to be where he's going. It's like, hey, we'll ask for apology later.
I think Yord is capable of a 180 because we saw him do a 180 when he was questioning Osha this whole time. And then once he saw that it wasn't Osha, he was like, okay, it wasn't Osha. I admit it. And he let go of that whole thing. So I could see Yord being the one who I think he's capable of realizing when he needs to change his opinion on something.
What would Cyril Karn do? He would go.
He would stalk without question.
Silently stalk them. Well, it just feels like Cyril. It's similar like that, right? He's kind of by the book and kind of thing. And I just wonder, like, it feels like he was so for like proving, or I guess capturing the villain, if you will. Like he just
I
went
feel
to
like
great
that's
lengths.
an unfair comparison.
Oh, I know why you think that, but
because I
if
don't
you remove your hate towards Cyril Karn, it makes sense. I think
he creeps me out, which is what he set out to do. So
yeah,
he
he's the Maz
succeeded in
Kanata for
that.
me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
all right. Well, we've got a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And I think maybe what we'll do for the Patreon episode this week is I've got a billion questions here set aside. We didn't get to them, of course. But maybe we'll set those aside and come back on Sunday. So this Sunday we'll do a Patreon show and we'll answer these questions of like, where is Yoda? Who started the fires?
How many times are we going to ask that question?
Well, we're gonna until he shows up. We're gonna keep asking that question.
Oh my gosh!
But
Yoda is probably on some middle of nowhere planet helping some tiny village.
I don't think he's gonna show up. I still don't think so.
Learning to
where
play
he is.
his little harmonica thing or whatever.
Yeah, that's probably where he is.
Yeah.
Right. His little
valid
banjo,
chord.
like Kermit the Frog kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to show up. I have that in here as for a fun question, but I do have a lot of other questions, and some of them we've talked about here, but I think it'd be fun to kind of sit with this over the next 3-4 days and then come back on Patreon and answer these questions. So preview to that. This weekend also, by the way, just to kind of plug our toot our own horn, plug our shows, Lauren and I will be back on Sunday night to cover the High Republic Adventures. I think we're covering issues 4 through 6. I think it's 4, 5, and 6. I may be wrong on that, but it's somewhere in the middle. We just did a show not too long ago on the first batch. This will be the second batch of the High Republic Adventures. So join us on Sunday night at 9 p.m. for that, followed by the Patreon show. Yeah, about 10 p.m., maybe 10:30, depending on how long we go.
Depending on how long I stay awake.
Yeah. I mean, you should have turned into a pumpkin by now, because I don't think this is the longest show you've ever done. It's not the longest one Jonesy and I have ever done, but it's the longest one Lauren's
Yeah,
done.
it's the longest one I've ever done, and I've almost made it. So I'm pretty proud of myself.
You're pretty fading.
She's driving. She was like, let's get to 3 hours. We could do it.
I know. We're almost there, guys. Just
11 and a half minutes. Let's do it.
We're like the needle's on E and the light's on with gas, and we're still driving, man, just to see, like Seinfeld, see where this goes.
Ease off the
Oh my
pedal and
God.
coast a little bit more.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of people that stuck around for
Oh, we
the
did.
entirety of this show. So thank you guys so much. And Jonesy, I know you got some shout outs on that level there.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, thanks for the download. If you'd like to come out and join the live stream, like all these amazing people we're going to read off here, cantinacast.com/YouTube. Hopefully I'm saying that right, because man, I'm exhausted too. Yeah, come out and visit the live stream, join the chat. There are a lot of people in the background. Thank you all for showing up. We hope you'll join us in the chat with your comments, like Steph, One Up versus CPU, Diego David, Sky, Trent, Mechanized, Alex, Raphael, Music Train, Reader Reborn, Neil Sega, John Pedro, Gary Smith, Jenny Wataro, Chris, My Star Wars Guys, Skywalker's Academies, Lefteros Comics, Joseph Ricci, Heart Countered, and V. If I missed anybody, not intentional, my sincerest apologies, but thank you all so much for coming out. We certainly appreciate it. And if you'd like to join Patreon and participate, that we have kind of video tiers and live stream tiers, you can join those as well as just audio only. CantinaCast.com/Patreon. We would love to have you a member of that, and you can get all of this really cool bonus content that we do weekly. So we'd love to see you over there as well.
Yep. And last thing before we get out of here, don't forget that we do have free posters to give away. We're going to give one poster away every episode. I've got this one up right now. So if you left a question in the live chat tonight, you're eligible so long as you've liked and subscribed to the show. Like this episode, subscribe to the channel. And then after this airs, if you want to leave a question in the comments, that'll make you eligible as well. We'll announce the winner on next week's show, which will be the 12th. We'll announce the winner for this one and mail one of these posters off in a nice round mailer. It's a beautiful poster. You guys are going to love it. So don't forget to leave your questions in the comment section there. All right, Lauren, any final words before we get out of here?
I want to enter the drawing for the poster.
I said you could. You're eligible. You're a Patreon member. So just,
okay.
Jonesy, what about you? Any final question? Way to think about yourself,
I just had
Lauren.
to make sure I said that before I forgot.
Lauren, off to a really good start. So I'm glad the first two episodes. We didn't really talk about this. Why, if it was necessary for them to pair these episodes together.
Oh, yeah.
I think this was actually a really great example of where they should and did and benefited from that. So I think this was a really good choice here. But off to a good start. This is encouraging. I think this is a new era of Star Wars, and I think we're all excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, intriguing is definitely a word I would use. Like we said at the very beginning, definitely invested in this, and I kind of want to see this go. I don't think I'll reserve my final opinion, especially for this kind of a storytelling and this kind of a series, probably to the very end. Yeah, you kind of have to be fair. I mean, it's okay to say I liked the first episode, didn't like the second episode, but really, I think until this is fully aired and you've had a chance to retrospectively look back, I think you're probably doing yourself a justice on firming up an opinion one way or the other at that point. But yeah, thank you guys, everybody, for joining us for the live stream. Thank you so much to our Patreon members. And again, don't forget that on Sunday, we'll be back to talk about the High Republic adventures. So more High Republic stuff, and we'll continue on with our Acolyte coverage. So until then, you guys have a good night.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.